Chapter 787. Having lost the controlling martial artist, the flowing tassel boat immediately lost control, causing panic. The half-raised wine cups stopped in mid-air, their mouths were wide open as they stared blankly at the figure that appeared out of thin air. Amongst them, the majority of them did not understand what was going on. In the next moment, he opened his eyes wide, revealing a look of disbelief. He forcibly suppressed the urge to escape. His butt seemed to be nailed to the chair, and he did not dare move an inch. That sentence took away the last bit of strength in Ji-Zai's body. He sat down weakly, but felt an indescribable sense of relief. The noose around his neck had finally loosened. He greedily breathed in the air, even though the air was filled with the stench of blood. He felt that it was extremely sweet. The flowing tassel boat in Tang Tian's black and white vision was extremely different from what ordinary people could see. The indistinctly flowing law threads, the unique materials that had their own unique law threads that formed a defensive system, and the martial artists that used the law threads to activate the wind produced a chaotic flow. All of the people who were screaming gradually quietened down, they all fell to the ground, their faces pale white, their bodies trembling. Everyone drooped their heads and curled up their bodies. Su Qing's headless corpse was a constant reminder to them to never let the terrifying demon notice them. He had seen people pull out their blades without saying a word, and he himself was such a person. Inside the boat, Ji-Zai clenched his teeth, but they were still trembling uncontrollably. The demon stood at the bow of the boat, facing the wind. "Sire, you came uninvited. Why don't you sit down and have a drink?" The wood shavings that were like raindrops, upon getting close to him, transformed into fine flames, and were instantly incinerated into ashes. Ji-Zai was startled. His mouth became dry. His heart jumped. He finally understood why Ji-Zai revealed such a strange expression. He glanced at Ji-Zai from the corner of his eyes. How did Ji-Zai have any arrogance left? He was like an extremely docile kitten hiding in a corner, as though he was trying his best to hide his fat body, and not attract the other party's attention. The demon stopped in his tracks. Thinking about his own words, Ji-Zai's mouth became extremely bitter. That fucking makes too much sense. He wanted to swallow his words back into his stomach. If that's the case, I won't have to meet such a terrifying person. The astonishing amount of law threads were like spiderwebs that covered the entire flowing tassel boat. Borrowing the airflow created by the flowing tassel ship, he was like a feather, absorbing the airflow of the ship. Although the flowing tassel ship used a large amount of soundproofing materials, to the current Tang Tian, it was not a problem. Just now, he was the first to discover the devil. Just as he was about to warn the others, he was shocked to discover that his perception seemed to be firmly glued to the other party. Following that, the air around him seemed to solidify, and his laws also began to solidify. All of his perception of the outside world was firmly absorbed by the other party. From the moment they boarded the ship until now, the demon hadn't said a word. His body was not burly, and his entire body was wrapped tightly. The style of the armor on his body was very strange. It was like a layer of molten iron, without any style to speak of. Too ruthless, it emitted a faint light, bright but not dazzling. Deathly silence. The armored devil stepped on the blood-soaked carpet and slowly walked toward him. The thick silver light disappeared as quickly as it came. Other than leaving an afterimage and two large holes on the left and right of the people's field of vision, the confused people thought that their eyes were playing tricks on them. But before they could fly more than 10 feet, they fell to the ground like sandbags. Thinking about his own performance, Ji-Zai blushed with shame. Su Qing had given him a vivid lesson on what it meant to lose, but not lose. It was a result that he was definitely not willing to face. Tang Tian's state of mind did not have any ripples. It was as though he was in the bizarre dream, fighting against the army of sapphire blue dwarves, and listened indifferently. The 220 long flowing tassel ship, in Tang Tian's eyes, looked like a huge dumpling that was covered with countless flickering law threads. This direction is to Sharp Wind City. Could it be some kind of unique liquid metal? The awakened god armor's surface was swimming with lightning snake silver auras, which immediately surged into his palm, causing his right palm to silently become dazzling and bright. The astonishing amount of lightning auras converged in his right palm. He was dumbstruck. How is that possible? Like rain hitting a banana tree, the splinters of wood caused a series of crackling sounds. When the dust settled, the cabin became quiet. Su Qing's face revealed a smile, his left hand extended out, as though he was a hospitable host, inviting his guest to sit down and drink a cup. Screams came out one after another, as they ran around like headless flies. The bodyguards on the ship saw that the situation was not right, and immediately jumped off the ship. Ignoring everything else, they ran away. Jizai's face was pale to the extreme. He wanted to turn around and escape the moment the lightning pillar shot out, but when he caught a glimpse of a figure that suddenly appeared out of the corner of his eye, he felt like a cat that had its neck tied by an invisible rope. Jizai's mouth was bitter. He felt that it was inconceivable. What penetrated the flowing tassel ship is lightning laws, and what was used against Su Qing should be spatial law threads. But what was used against me? He had not figured it out yet. Now that he had revealed such a powerful wind law, the more he understood, the more despair he felt. All of the guests who were stunned seemed to have awoken from a dream. The floor full of blood and Su Qing's corpse had frightened them. Splinters of wood flew everywhere like rain. A figure had appeared out of nowhere, and stood there indifferently. A thin line of blood appeared on Su Qing's neck. He still maintained the posture of extending his hand out, only his eyes were wide open, revealing the shock in his heart. Blood spurted out like a fountain, splattering all over the table in front of him, causing Su Qing to fall to the ground. I am bewitching Blade Jizai. Jizai's eyes were wide open. His face that had just regained some color, had instantly turned pale white. This is the feeling. It was as though the sky was filled with dumplings. He felt as though his body was being imprisoned. The other party's ghostly footsteps landed in his ears, as though they were calling for his soul, and he could feel the noose around his neck tightening bit by bit. The flowing tassel ship flew faster and faster, flying higher and higher. Suddenly, the sunlight shone into the cabin, and the figure standing at the bow of the ship looked like a god of war. Who the hell is he? Damn it! He even knew that the indistinct killing intent was purposely sensed by the other party. If the other party wanted to kill him, he would have died long ago. Damn it! Bewitching Blade Jizai. I am bewitching Blade Jizai. How can I, damn it? What the hell is he? He roared in his heart. He obediently raised both of his hands, and using his last bit of strength, he spoke weakly. I surrender. Even Jizai is acting like that. But in the next moment, the flowing tassel ship that had lost control seemed to be held by an invisible hand, and stabilized once again. The panicking people who had just calmed down suddenly lost their balance. The stabilized flowing tassel ship suddenly shot forward, and screams sounded out again. Tang Tian suddenly appeared outside of the flowing tassel ship like a ghost. I have already lost. Who cares if I lost or not? He did not know if it was a misconception, but he felt that his breathing had become difficult. This guy is Ghost Face Mask. This realization not only did not help his situation at all, but instead caused him to sink into an even deeper fear, as well as a sense of helplessness that he had never felt before. It was the first time he had seen a ruthless person who would not say a word and attack him. The stifled sobs of the maids were intermittent. He muttered in his heart, shouldn't a person with a bit of status sit down and chat at such a time? Why did he directly make a move? Why did he directly kill me? The feeling this time was different from before, but the result was the same. An indistinct killing intent was like an invisible noose around his neck. As long as he dared to make any strange movements, there would only be one result for him. But Tang Tian was still able to find 6 different-sized holes in the dense net. His gaze landed on the hole that was closest to the cabin. He raised his right palm and stretched out his arm, facing the side of the ship. Ji-Zhe racked his brains. Such a unique armor, if it had appeared before, there would definitely be traces left behind, but why did he have no impression of it at all? He did not plan to wait any longer, as wasting time was not a good habit. After confirming the identity of the enemy and their intentions, there was no meaning in delaying any longer. The terrifying demon did not look at him again and turned to leave. Ji-Zhe almost cried. He had never thought that there would be a day where he would be reduced to such a state. Those on the list of powerhouses are experts? Ji-Zhe could not help but feel admiration. Previously, he had looked down on the good-for-nothing. If not for the other party's identity, he would not have bothered with him. I never thought that he would be able to maintain his composure in such a situation, just based on his ability to maintain his composure. He is much stronger than me. In the next moment, his expression froze on his face. Su Qing, who had a look of suspicion, was about to ask, but suddenly, a loud explosion sounded out, causing Su Qing's pupils to dilate. In his vision, a thick and dazzling silver pillar of light had pierced through the left side of the ship, and in an instant, pierced through the right side of the ship, and pierced through the middle of the flowing tassel ship. Because the martial artists controlling the ship had escaped, none of them were left alive. But the flowing tassel ship was even more stable and faster than before, as though it was gliding on a smooth ice surface. He was controlling the flowing tassel ship by himself, and was actually more outstanding than 10 martial artists that were proficient in wind laws. Ji-Zhe then saw the demon that had suddenly appeared. Su Qing's heart was jumping, but he forced himself to calm down. He extended his hand towards the wine cup, using this action to conceal the panic in his heart. When his fingers touched the wine cup, his heart finally calmed down. What he did not understand was that such a powerful person, he was actually unable to find a similar existence in the legends. He could clearly hear the conversation in the cabin. At this moment, the deathly silence in the cabin exploded. It feels good to be alive. Other than Ji-Zhe, Su Qing was the first to react. He was truly someone who had seen the world, and was able to stand up for himself. He could not help himself. The people behind him stopped in their tracks. No one saw how the martial artists died, but fear occupied their hearts. They were trembling, their faces as white as paper, their bodies trembling. No one dared to escape. At that time, the words surfaced in his mind. He was like a statue, not daring to move. Chapter 788. Ji-Zhe? Did that guy just call himself Ji-Zhe? Other than being the future #1 infamous man, even in the Sin Domain's list of powerhouses, many people believed that Ji-Zhe would definitely be one of the top 3 in 10 years. When he discovered Master Ghost Face Mask, the reason why he was so shocked was because he possessed extraordinary acute senses. Before anyone else noticed Ghost Face Mask, he had already sensed him, and acutely sensed the extremely dangerous and terrifying aura. With that, he turned and left. The awakened god armor's power was extremely strong, but its consumption was also extremely shocking. The awakened god armor was actually a byproduct of forcing Tang Tian into a critical state. It had almost drained 95% of Tang Tian's strength. Only in this way could Tang Tian enter the critical state, the so-called awakened state. To Niechio, the journey to Galloping Horse City was like a march, and he did not meet with any problems. Tang Tian deactivated his awakened gear. His vision gradually returned to normal, and his mind also left the strange state. The undying sword on the weeping sword seal formed by the sky demon's hand in his body rippled like an invisible hand, constantly massaging every inch of his body, giving him an indescribable sense of comfort. Ji-Zhe was secretly suspicious. Tang Tian didn't know what Ji-Zhe was thinking, and even if he knew, he wouldn't care. For the sake of victory, temporarily swallowing the insult was just a way to numb the other party. Ji-Zhe, who was in front of him, had the illusion that the lord who had removed his armor had suddenly turned from a god to a mortal. That terrifying aura that made one's heart palpitate had disappeared without a trace. Even before boarding the ship, Fu Jingji had already guessed it, but upon seeing Su Qian's corpse, his face could not help but change. The master in front of him was no different from an ordinary person. He could even hear the slight panting sounds, as if he was very tired. The four main cities began to feel the pressure. Purposely acting weak to test me? Wait a minute. All of the Null Division members in Galloping Horse City returned to their units, and the various families used as compensation for their crimes to pile up like a mountain. But Nie Qiu did not care about such things. He had set up the Lu family as a barracks, and was currently focused on training. With that thought, Fu Jingji immediately calmed down. Only Ji Zhe was left with a thoughtful expression. Probing, that's right, this must be a probing. But now Fu Jingji's face revealed a look of shock. At the start, Tang Tian could not even remove the awakened god armor. After Lu Xingxiang brought the Lu family spies and escaped, the Galloping Horse City. The Lu clan had always been the leader of all the clans in Galloping Horse City. No one would have thought that the Lu clan would fall apart overnight. Asshole! Ji Zhe was extremely pleased. Ji Zhe. They couldn't imagine what kind of person could make the Lu family so afraid. An unprecedented panic enveloped all the clans of Galloping Horse City. At this moment, none of the clans were in the mood to divide up the remaining assets of the Lu family. The various family members knew, and when they heard the news, the family became even more. Family. One family, one of the family. Family. Master Ghost Face Mask's improvement in the past few days was simply astonishing. One great experts 11112 great of evil. The of demons Zay of the 12 was one long one. Demons of Mu Hao San Long 1 Ghost Mu Long Mu Tiantang. By Mu a 1 Hao. Among the 12 evil great experts, the top 3 had a slight difference in strength, and could be considered as martial artists of the same level. Ji Zhe, who was ranked 3rd, and Suo Lin, who was ranked 4th, regardless of whether it was in terms of prestige or strength, there was a huge difference. The difference between the 4th and 12th was not huge. With the increasing number of members returning, the Null Division's overall strength had dropped, and the new members needed time to adapt to the new tactic. The other party sensed his gaze and turned to look, then placed his attention on Master Ghost Face Mask. The number of Null Division members under Nie Qiu had already reached 2,000. Everyone looked at each other. Fu Jingji's eyes were wide open, cold sweat instantly drenched his back. I never thought that the Undying Sword can actually remove fatigue. It is an unexpected surprise. Especially after the Battle of Sharp Wind City, Ghost Face Mask's words, "Those who imprison my subordinates will die," spread out. All the families that still had Null Division prisoners trembled in fear. Ji Zhe imagined his own bewitching blade stabbing into Ghost Face Mask's chest. Ghost Face Mask's face of shock and disbelief, and he felt an indescribable excitement, to the point that he was trembling. It was through his increased control that Tang Tian, who was equipped with the awakened god armor, was able to use only half of the power of the physique to unleash a fighting strength that was many times stronger than before. Ha 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 ha, only a powerful martial artist like Ghost Face Mask has the qualifications to become my bewitching blade Ji Zhe's prey. Master Ghost Face Mask, what do you need Ji Zhe to do? I want to be like a lone wolf in the wilderness, crafty and patient. As long as I have enough patience, I will definitely find Ghost Face Mask's weakness and flaws, and at that time, the flowing tassel boat in front of him proved that point. Compared to the value of the Null Division prisoners, the benefits of the families were more important, and no one wanted to become the second Lu family. Fu Jingji and the rest were dumbstruck. Nie Qiu knew that this problem would haunt him for a long time. As expected, 2 days later, the neighboring cities of Galloping Horse City, Baizhe City and Shangyi City, all the families started to respectfully send their Null Division members over. But what made them even more dumbstruck was that one after another, the captives dressed in luxurious clothes, all of them dejectedly but obediently came down from the boat. In the entire process there was no sound, no clamor, no one resisted or made any small movements. Hearing Jizai's request, Tang Tian was startled. He turned and said to Fu Jingji, "Find something for him to do." When the flowing tassel boat flew to Sharp Wind City, it caused a commotion. Only when they saw Tang Tian standing at the bow of the boat did Sharp Wind City calm down for a short period of time, followed by an even bigger commotion. The flowing tassel boat was not a nameless boat, but instead, it was extremely famous. There were very few big boats in the Xin domain because of the lack of materials. The Xin domain itself was a barren land, and the majority of the rare materials were scarce. The boat's body was huge, and required a lot of materials, which was extremely costly. Carriages were the most popular, but boats were extremely rare, and only the big families had the ability to make boat. He is definitely not a nameless person. Master actually took over the flowing tassel boat. So when Ye Qiu led the Null Division to Galloping Horse City, they did not meet with any resistance. The various families of Galloping Horse City respectfully stood guard outside the city, welcoming the Null Division into the city. It was their first time seeing an army, and they were immediately frightened out of their wits by the Null Division. It could be imagined that when Fu Jingji knew that the seemingly cold and sinister young man was actually bewitching Blade Jizai, he received a huge impact. Fu Jingji himself was also a martial artist on the list of powerhouses, but he clearly knew the disparity between him and Jizai. At their level of strength, every little bit of improvement had become incomparably difficult. Fu Jingji's gaze swept across the captives. Su Qian was not an expert, but since he came, he definitely had something to rely on. When he saw a young and skinny man, his gaze froze. Jizai lowered his head and stared at his feet. His expression did not change at all. He was still extremely respectful and docile, only his long and narrow eyes flashed with a sinister and cunning light aura. Jizai! Fu Jingji, who boarded the boat, saw the corpse in the pool of blood, and only when the head was found did everyone realize that Su Qian was killed by the master. One of the 12 rank A infamous great tyrants, ranked 3rd, the terrifying bewitching Blade Jizai, who was hailed to rule the entire infamous man world in 10 years. Fu Jingji stared blankly at the young man in front of Master Ghost Face Mask. Where was the wild and sinister look from him? What lone wolf roaming the wilderness at night? He's just a fawning watchdog. Are the youths nowadays able to change their faces so proficiently? Where's the youthful vigor and vigor? Where's the impulsiveness of youths? To be so experienced at such a young age, how can all of us old men continue to live? Thinking about Master Ghost Face Mask, the shock that bewitching Blade Jizai gave him immediately lessened. No matter how strong I am not as strong as Master Ghost Face Mask. No matter how much potential I have, I am not as strong as Master. If not for the awakened state, where Tang Tian's control over his strength had reached an extremely perverse level, adding the awakened god armor that further strengthened his control, allowing his control over laws to reach a whole new height, he would not be able to hold on. Will I fall for such a simple trick? Naive. The 3 people in front had left the people behind them far behind. But the 25-year-old Jizai was able to enter the top 3 ranks of the infamous men, and that was the reason why he was viewed as the number 1 infamous man in 10 years. The 2 in front were already over 50 years old, and were starting to decline, while the 25-year-old Jizai was still far from his peak. Fu Jingji wanted to remind the master to be careful of him, but heard a fawning request. The holes on both sides of the boat, and the stench of blood, indicated that a battle had occurred. After the Battle of Sharp Wind City, Lu Xingxiang had fled, causing Ghost Face Mask's reputation to soar, and also causing the Null Division prisoners to become a hot potato. Ghost Face Mask and his Null Division prisoners. The flowing tassel boat was extremely famous amongst the many large boats. Other than the Su family, it was famous for being extremely luxurious. Out of all the large boats in the Sin domain, the flowing tassel boat was one of the 3 most luxurious boats. I am bewitching Blade Ji. In the battle a few days ago, Fu Jingji was still somewhat unresigned when he surrendered, but after personally witnessing Ghost Face Mask's transformation, he no longer had any heart to resist. Ghost Face Mask's display of terrifying potential made everyone see a bright future. Alright, it was no longer just potential. Ghost Face Mask's current strength was enough to shake the entire Sin domain. But currently, he was able to better control every strand of power, and had even grasped a few techniques to use laws to recover his own strength. It was by relying on these techniques, and his continuous increase in enlightenment towards laws, that Tang Tian was finally able to hold on until he disarmed himself. But that glance caused Fu Jingji's face to change, and his heart to tremble. The gaze that was as sharp as a blade revealed a strange wildness and coldness, like a lone wolf in the wilderness, brimming with a dangerous aura. Chapter 789. In the past 2 days, there were obviously more scouts than before. All of them came from different powerhouses, and the number of them caused Su Yi to be shocked. They had just surrounded a stronghold, but the other party actually used a trick and pretended to surrender, causing Zhong Li Bai's men to suffer a huge loss. The captives' faces were ashen, their boss's plan had failed, and to them, it was obvious how tragic their outcome would be. For some reason, he liked to sit on the city walls and watch the Null Division's training. Su Yi suddenly stood up. He sensed that someone was spying on him. A blind man dares to point fingers at me? I am only here to learn the heavy demonic execution. Master has never hidden his intentions, he just wants to lead the Null Division back to the Sacred Saint Galaxy, and from what Master said, there is a high possibility of a war breaking out there. Draw 1 out of 10, kill. But damn it, what does an army battle have to do with me? He snorted and walked out. He did not believe that the blind man would dare to do anything to him. Su Yi frowned, a look of worry flashed past his eyes. He had never thought that there would be a day where his enemies would be the terrifying existences of the 4 main cities. Thinking about that, Su Yi could not help but smile. The Purple Cuckoo City was just a small city at the border, and the Qin family at that time was like an immovable mountain, but who knew that they would actually be able to pose a threat to the 4 main cities? The Sin domain that was struggling at death's door had already lost its morale, and the people of Sin domain were used to living with their heads lowered. But this group of people were different. They were brimming with vitality, filled with passion for life, and filled with fearlessness towards battles. Even as prisoners, they maintained their straight backs and stiff necks. They were arrogant and untamed. Xiao Han Guang was speechless. Although he was proud and arrogant, but he was not a fool, and nothing was more convincing than a real battle. The Sin domain that had sunk, the Sin domain that had lost its will to fight, the Sin domain that was struggling at death's door was like a rotting tree. The blind man actually walked in front of him, causing Zhong Li Bai's mood to be extremely terrible. What made him even more depressed was that the master's strength had increased by leaps and bounds, causing his battle plans to become a joke. There seemed to be quite a number of them, but their combat power was no different from cannon fodder. Han Bingning had a completely different style. She was like a metal net with blades hanging all over it. She most commonly used the combined attacks of 3 to 5 people, sometimes gathering and sometimes separating. Every strike did not have a Maori smite, but it was extremely sharp, and Xiao Han Guang realized that his demonic seal that had many variations was quickly becoming difficult to deal with. Although in the end, he had caused nearly half of Han Bingning's team to be injured and displayed his personal strength to the fullest, he was still unable to reverse the crushing defeat. That was why he liked to watch the Null Division members train from afar. Only by watching them would he feel that his life was filled with hope, and his heart that was shrouded in darkness would be able to see the light. It was probably because they did not fit in with the Sin domain. Suddenly, Su Yi was envious of the Null Division members. On the afternoon of the march, he was requested to participate in all of the Null Division's training. Ever since he was handed over to the Null Division, things had completely gone out of control. Zhong Libai said indifferently. His subordinates pounced onto the captives like wolves and tigers, and begging for mercy and wailing could be heard. Zhong Libai turned a deaf ear to them. All of the bandits had blood on their hands, and if not for the fact that he needed to borrow their strength, he would have killed all of them long ago. The Galloping Horse City and the 4 main cities were neighbors, and with an army of over 2,000 trained soldiers stationed here, how could the 4 main cities remain indifferent? Damn it! With the Master's speed, before my plan is realized, the Null Division will be in my hands. A genius young man being beaten to a pulp is truly a delightful sight. Su Yi rejoiced in his misfortune. Su Yi, who had participated in the training for a period of time, knew how terrifying the Null Division was, and even Su Xiangdong had suffered under their blades. He had shamefully fainted. This is definitely a damned place. The 4 main cities would definitely not take action. The masters were too unfamiliar with armies, to the point that they would not easily take risk. Most of the spies in the surroundings are related to the 4 main cities. Su Ye's strength made him fearful. Sharp Wind Cities. Su Ye's enlightenment caused the terrifying death chi and left a deep impression on him. But he was only fearful, he was not afraid. They were the true overlords of the Sin domain, and every corner of the Sin domain was linked to them in countless ways. But he did not dare to be distracted. If there was a slight mistake in their teamwork, not only him, the entire team would have to face the punishment of additional training. If it was him in the past, he would have left long ago. How can these weaklings be worthy of being my teammates? Zhong Libai, who came from a martial arts background, naturally did not like Bandit. An unforgettable and shameful battle had begun. The tide of berserk attacks came one after another. The terrifying slashes were like a torrential downpour, causing him to quickly lose himself. He only lasted for 30 seconds, a pitiful 30 seconds. He was then caught by the crafty Amauri, the big man who had taught him the heavy demonic execution with a good temper in the day, raised his large guillotine blade, and used all his strength to strike Xiao Hanguang's body without any hesitation. Xiao Hanguang roared in his heart, but facing Nie Chio's promise to teach him the heavy demonic execution as long as he passed the daily training, he obediently participated in it. Xiao Hanguang was stronger than Su Xiangdong, but the Null Division was also much stronger than before. The experts of the various families in Purple Cuckoo City, as well as powerful martial artists like Gu Shui, had assimilated into the Null Division, raising their fighting capabilities greatly. All of the Null Division members clenched their teeth, and were training tirelessly. As an outsider, Su Yi felt that the training was extremely dry and tedious. But all of the Null Division members had red faces, perspiration all over their faces. They gasped for breath and opened their eyes wide. Before he could even walk out of the barracks, Su Yi blocked his path. His reason was ruthlessly rejected by the despicable blind man. The blind man said with a calm face, since the master had handed the army over to him, then he had the final say in the matters of the army. When had the proud and arrogant Xiao Hanguang ever suffered such humiliation? He had nothing to say about losing to Ghost Face Mask, but that did not mean that he was a noodle that could be kneaded by anyone. Amauri was like an unstoppable heavy hammer. He liked to use the combined strength of his entire team to slash, which was extremely powerful and powerful. Su Yi sat on the city wall, and watched Xiao Hanguang, who was training bitterly with interest. He rushed towards the group without hesitation. What a joke, what a tragedy! Xiao Hanguang cursed in his heart. His entire body was covered in dust, and he was in a sorry state. Ever since he was young, he had never been so dirty, and occasionally, he would look at himself from the snow-white blade, the figure that looked like a beggar. He almost could not recognize himself. I just want to learn the heavy demonic execution, that's all. He shook his head, and got rid of the unnecessary thoughts in his mind, and thought about how to complete the mission given to him by the master. How will the four main cities retaliate? Amauri, Han Bingning and the rest had improved so quickly that it caused people to be dumbstruck. Thinking about the strength that the four main cities had, Su Ye's face became gloomy. Xiao Han Guang scoffed, just based on these people, they think they can stop me? Upon thinking about that, Zhongli Bai subconsciously covered his face burning up. Just at that moment, a scout rushed in anxiously. Master, there's a situation. But he was no different from a bandit. His army had expanded by several times, and currently had over 20,000 men under him. All of the strongholds along the way were swept by him, and all of the bandits were under him. Xiao Han Guang felt that it was the best chance for him to prove himself, and he took the lead and rushed towards Han Bingning. But he quickly fell into trouble. Han Bingning's fighting style was completely different from Amauri. What made him even more depressed was that the Battle of Sharp Wind City's master had displayed his might, and in the end, Nie Qiu, that blind bastard, had taken advantage of him, and he heard that he already had 2,000 Null Division men under him. Even though he had 20,000 men, he knew that they were definitely not Nie Qiu's 2,000 men. The Sin domain had already forgotten the glory of their ancestors, and even the spirit that had opened up the Sin domain 2 generations ago had disappeared without a trace. How many years has it been since the 17 cities of Sin domain have increased? Nie Qiu did not speak any nonsense, and only allowed Han Bingning to bring a small team to fight against Xiao Han Guang's team. Countless figures surged out from every corner of the barracks and rushed towards him. Su Yi was a man full of evil tricks, and hid him when he was down, saying that as long as he could escape from the group of people, he would not need to participate in the army training. The proud and arrogant Xiao Han Guang had been a genius since young, and all of the mediocre teammates around him, he looked down on them, as they were unable to keep up with his rhythm. But very quickly, he was punished, and the unconvinced him spouted out arrogant words. This kind of cooperation has no meaning at all. What will they do? Different from Nie Qiu, Su Yi had a better understanding of the way the masters of Sin domain did things. Just at that moment the entire barracks started to tremble. Following that, he was awoken by a bucket of cold water, and then was thrown into the group by Amauri like a chick, and started to participate in the training. Only in the ashes can there be a new sprout of hope. I brought a group of people out, and after wandering around aimlessly, I have to return with my face covered in dirt? What results did I achieve? Oh, I swept through many strongholds, killed many bandits, and made outstanding contributions to the security of the Sin domain. To Su Yi, their strength was not worth mentioning, but they were filled with passion, to the point that he felt that they were crazy. They trusted each other, were united, and even to Nie Qiu's eyes, their tacit understanding was not up to standard, but to Su Yi, it was enough to cause others to be shocked. But a pity, Master is not interested in the Sin domain at all. Su Yi sighed in his heart. The various families of the Sin domain were filled with caution towards the Master, but they never thought that the Master did not have any feelings for the Sin domain. He began to live a miserable life that was like hell. The huge Sin domain actually had no way to deal with the group of prisoners. When the Sin domain people helplessly looked at the Null Division prisoners who were originally their captives, it truly made people suspect who was the real captive. Unlucky! Zhongli Bai's face became ugly. He fiercely spat out with killing intent. They had completed the mission of accepting the Null Division members from Galloping Horse City perfectly, and even exceeded their expectations, but Su Yi knew that it was not because of their hard work, but because the surrounding families were intimidated by the Master's strength. As a subordinate, it was because of the Master's might that they were able to complete the mission, and that was nothing to brag about. Chapter 790. Tang Tian's generosity had actually surprised him. Nie Qiu laughed and then stood up, leaving the dumbstruck Su Yi behind. On the tall walls of Galloping Horse City, 4 figures stood side by side, overlooking the scene. The hall was silent, and the killing intent pervaded out. the boss who was extremely ruthless to his enemies, was extremely generous to his subordinates, and was a fair person. Whoever had the best attitude in training, whoever had the highest achievements, would receive the most rewards. Using strict discipline to control his subordinates, using generous rewards to attract his subordinates, all of the undisciplined bandits gradually changed their fighting capabilities. Come, in the name of our king, victory! All of the elites of East Immortal City, although they did not understand what a military general was, but victory was a reality. Victory after victory was like the most delicious delicacy. Once they had tasted it, they could no longer stop. After continuously swallowing a few strongholds, his strength had increased greatly, and the name of the East Mountain Bandits became famous. Everyone knew that there was a new group of powerful bandits that had continuously swallowed a few strongholds. Amongst them, there were the elites of the various families in East Immortal City, the elites of the bandits, but the majority of them were the ordinary refugees of the strongholds. These refugees had no status in the strongholds, they had to do the heaviest labor, and received the least amount of food. Suyi was amused by Niechio's words, but he quickly kept the smile on his face. The good news is, Master has captured the Su family's flowing tassel boat, killed Su Qing, and captured Ji Zhe. Everyone in position. The personal guard barracks had the most generous treatment, but at the same time, they had to undergo the harshest training. The training that made the bandits speechless did not cause any waves in the personal guard barrack. Niechio laughed. I hope that the good news is better, and I hope that the bad news is not that bad. The Liu family in Galloping Horse City suddenly became brightly lit, and streams of people flowed in and out. I feel that they are rather organized. The one who spoke was a lady. She had a head full of lustrous purple hair, a waist that resembled a water snake, a full and perky chest, bright red lips and ice-blue eyes, giving off a seductive feeling. Yes, they said that they are looking for our East Mountain Bandits to do business. No one knew his name, but the Death Servant's name was known by everyone in the Sin domain. He was ranked 28 on the list of powerhouses. He was extremely mysterious, and other than knowing that he cultivated the law of death, there was no other information. He lived in seclusion and rarely appeared. Who would have thought that the Su family would actually invite him out of seclusion this time? Sounds like the results are impressive. Niechio agreed. Even the bandits who had pledged allegiance to him later on had gradually submitted to him. To bandits, most of them were people who couldn't survive in the city, so they had to be treated well. And all the arrogant and unruly troublemakers, the slippery old foxes, were all beheaded by Zhongli Bai without hesitation. 2,500 personal guards were the core strength of the Eastern Mountain Bandit. In the Leo constellation, such a treasure would definitely not be given to their subordinate. Of course, even if he did, it was definitely not something that someone of his level could hope for. Because he wished to display his ambitions, he left Leo constellation and joined Tang Tian, but he was still extremely cautious. No matter how one looked at it, he was not a direct descendant. In the first battle, the personal guard camp suffered heavy casualties, but Zhongli Bai rewarded the survivors. Replenishing the manpower did not take much effort. Countless of refugees were thinking with red eyes, as though they were breaking their heads to join the personal guard camp. Even if they knew, they did not care, as completing the training meant that they would be able to eat their fill, and their families would not have to starve. Compared to the hopeless work, what was training? All of the lowly refugees would even fight to the point of fainting during the training. Zhongli Bai sneered. Then let's see who they are and let them come in. Send the order to the personal guard camp. Let them welcome the esteemed guests. If we were to say that the majority of them were forced to submit previously but now they truly supported Zhongli Bai. What's the situation? He enunciated the word, esteemed guests, very clearly. It doesn't sound like it, it's extremely so. Suyi thought about how Niechio was not familiar with the Sin domain, no wonder he was so calm, and explained. Ji Zhe is known as the Bewitching Blade, the third of the 12 infamous great heroes, and is the youngest out of the infamous great heroes, overflowing with talent. I never thought that he would be captured by Master. It would be hard for the entire Sin domain to not be shaken. Along the way, they swept through all of the strongholds like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. All of the impregnable strongholds crumbled effortlessly in front of the Master. They did not have many casualties, as many of them had fought with the bandits before. The vicious and evil bandits were extremely difficult to deal with. Their fighting techniques were ferocious and tenacious, and they were extremely difficult to exterminate. Seeking an audience with me? Zhong Li squinted his eyes. The standard of treatment far exceeded his expectations. Their boss was a ruthless man who did not even blink when blood flowed like a river, and even the most vicious and merciless bandits were like lambs in front of him. None of them knew that their daily training and fighting methods were the legendary army tactic. They did not say what business they were doing. The scout said honestly. He had initially thought that it would be good enough for Tang Tian to give him the authority to build an army, and did not even hope for the army to receive the treatment of a core army. The scout was stared at by Zhong Li's ferocious gaze, and could not help but tremble. He immediately said, "There are people outside seeking an audience with boss." The three guests were overwhelmed with shock in front of such an elite army. Su Yi revealed a bitter smile. The bad news is Su Qing's death has shaken the Su family. The Su family's revenge will also follow. Su Qing's death has given the Su family enough reason. I was previously worried that the four main cities would use some methods to probe us, but now that I see it, I reckon that the Su family will be the vanguard. Nie Qiu sat down. In front of him, the growing Yin sword floated in the air, the sword tip pointed to the ground. Sensing the miraculous connection between himself and the growing Yin sword, Nie Qiu was in a daze. Through continuous probing, his understanding of the growing Yin sword had deepened. It could greatly increase the might of his formation, and he also understood the value of the sword. The one who came in to report was an old man from East Immortal City. He swallowed his saliva with difficulty. He felt that his boss's gaze was like that of a wolf, wanting to swallow him whole. Zhong Li was extremely dissatisfied with his own achievements, but in the eyes of his subordinates, it was already shocking. After a few battles, the personal guard unit had quickly matured, like a treasured blade that had seen blood, revealing its extraordinary might. Every time the battle reached a stalemate, they would definitely be the power to break the balance. With such a life, what more can I ask for? It was dead silence, but it was filled with an indescribable awe. The three of them were startled. Did he discover something? They could not help but look at the Liu family courtyard. To people who had fallen to the ground, to be able to use their lowly lives to exchange for the hope of seeing the sunlight, they would not hesitate. They were weak, and did not have the habit of flaunting their strength, and did not reject the complicated coordination and tactic. But what he did not expect was that not only did the master hand the null division over to him, and gave him sufficient trust and space, he even gave him the precious treasure, the growing Yin sword. It truly is good news. Nie Qiu could not help but be happy. Zhong Li sat at the seat of honor. All of the personal guards were carefully selected by him out of over 100,000 people. Thinking about how he had sighed in the past, to be able to fight happily, he was extremely fortunate. In the Leo constellation, although everyone was shocked by his talent, but he had never received such attention before. But under the master's command, he was an outsider, and was actually able to command a core army. The trust and expectation in him weighed heavily on his heart, but gave him boundless motivation. Galloping Horse City. Your judgment is accurate. Many of the bandits wanted to see Zhong Li make a fool of himself. What use were the weak refugees? They did not even have the qualifications to be cannon fodder. A tall figure with a gloomy voice, it was Qin Zhen. His eyes revealed a look of hatred. It was the hateful ants in front of him that destroyed the Qin family, and completely destroyed his decades of hard work. Prepare to face the enemy. Just at that moment, a shrill alarm sounded out like the cry of an owl, breaking the silence. The other person was enveloped in a black mist, like a specter. The other three seemed to be extremely fearful of him, and subconsciously maintained a distance from him. Zhong Libai raised his head, his expression unkind. "I'm afraid so." Su Ye's eyes flashed with a look of worry. The Su family's retaliation will definitely be extremely powerful. The life and death training caused all the onlookers to keep quiet. The personal guards were not the strongest out of all of them, but they were definitely the most obedient, had the most proper attitude in training, and were the most fearless. I have good news and bad news. The surrounding personal guards all stood up, the laxness on their bodies disappeared, they quietly took out their weapons and found their positions. The colors of the armor were extremely messy, but it did not cause the group of elites to lose their color. All of them held their heads high and puffed out their chests. Their expressions were indifferent. On the parts of their bodies that were exposed, there was not a single piece that was unscathed, interweaving with each other. The strong were respected. Su Ye's expression was complicated. Nie Chio's hand held onto the growing Yin sword's hilt. His world suddenly quietened down, the fringe on his forehead moved without any wind. His pale and weak face revealed a warm yet fanatical smile. Zhong Libai had unexpectedly chosen them. The blades and swords were like a forest, killing intent pervading the air. Sophie ranked 36th on the list of powerhouses. Business. Zhong Libai muttered, his heart feeling strange. Just at that moment, a voice came out from the dense black mist. They truly look like ants. Fights between bandits would happen from time to time, and no one would link him to Ghostface Mask. I understand. Nie Chio nodded his head. We will soon face their retaliation. By his side was an old man who looked like a farmer. Lu Xingxiang, the previous patriarch of the Lu family, seemed to have aged another 10 years. The wrinkles on his face deepened. He was speechless. He pulled his group out of East Immortal City. For the sake of not attracting attention, he disguised himself as a bandit, and gave himself the name of East Mountain Bandit. Come, fight in the name of my king. Chapter 791. When the wind blew past them, it seemed to have disappeared, the air around the two of them stopped flowing, and they stared at the galloping horse city that occasionally released light auras. Fu Jingji subconsciously asked, "How do you know?" Hearing that, the middle-aged man turned his head, his eyes flashing with a strange light aura. "I don't think it's a bad thing." He was thinking about an extremely realistic problem. Ji Zhe did not think much of it, but he did not dare show it on his face. Fu Jingji lowered his head, who knew what he was thinking about. He had asked Fu Jingji and Ji Zhe about how powerful martial artists who had gained enlightenment on law domains were. But regardless of whether it was Fu Jingji or Ji Zhe, they were unable to describe law domains. They honestly said that other than Dooku, no one knew how law domain martial artists fought. Take another step? The white-brow old man looked at the middle-aged man. The Sin domain is already ours. Take another step? Could it be that you want to return to the Sacred Saint Galaxy? The light aura from the explosion reflected on his face, which was extremely calm. If this idea was truly successful, then the Sin domain would most likely change because of it. The white-brow old man looked as though he had seen a ghost. A look of panic surfaced on his face, and he blurted out, "Everyone will not agree to it. You will cause everyone to die. The theory of laws will be rewritten." Ji Zhe, who had initially planned to shut up, suddenly replied, "Who doesn't want to?" No one knew how strong Dooku was, and there were no rumors of him fighting in the outside world. He was an extremely low-profile person, pragmatic and introverted, and when he was young, he had actively participated in the matters of the family, and on this point, he was extremely different from the other powerful martial artists. The Su family's choice will naturally be borne by them. The middle-aged man said nonchalantly, "If not for their help, we would not be able to see the true strength of the army. Using laws to connect everyone, interesting." Hearing that, the two of them raised their heads at the same time, revealing looks of curiosity. Tang Tian threw the question to the side and said, I called you guys over because I have an idea and wanted you guys to try it out. Fu Jingji's face was filled with shock. There was no news of this in the Sin domain. The number one man of the Sin domain was actually quietly trying to break through the Sin door. That was an explosive news. Because I was preparing to go to the Sin door. Ji Zhe was proud of himself, but when he saw the suspicious gazes of the two, he immediately explained, I just want to see what the Sin door looks like, I am not Du Ku. Both of them were experts, and their understanding of the laws was far deeper than others. To others, such a thought was no different than wishful thinking. Different laws were incompatible with each other, and the higher the level of cultivation of a law, the harder it was to combine them. The two of them looked at each other and saw the excitement, shock, and anticipation in each other's eyes. The Sin door was guarded by the Honorable Martial Continent, and was the only checkpoint to the Honorable Martial Continent from the Sin domain. Ever since their ancestors stepped into the Sin domain, countless people had tried to break through the Sin door, but no one succeeded, and that path became the burial ground for countless people, and was hailed as the path of death. It had been many years since anyone had set foot on the path of death. Tang Tian suddenly clapped his hands. He wants to return to the sanctuary? Why not? The middle-aged man met the old man's gaze without avoiding it. The awakened god armor was very strong, but how could he use it to defeat his opponent? But Ji Zhe knew quite a lot. He turned and asked, Are you familiar with the Sin Gate? Tang Tian was still immersed in the awakened god armor. The more he explored, the more he felt that the awakened god armor was powerful. It was a brand new world that was extremely vast, with too many unknowns, as though there was no end to it. It was a middle-aged man roughly 40 years old, with a tall and sturdy figure, thick eyebrows and big eyes. Ghost Face Mask's subordinates are all talented people. The white-brow old man said, If not for seeing it with our own eyes, I am afraid that we would still be in the dark. Ghost Face Mask is not a simple man, and even Ji Zhe was captured by him. With such powerful subordinates, if we give him a few more days, I am afraid that the Sin domain will be his world. The awakened god armor seemed to contain all of the laws. It was like an interface for countless of laws, and everyone's law surface could find the corresponding interface. In theory, this idea was feasible. When tens or even hundreds of law surfaces were connected to the awakened god armor, the power between the law surfaces would be able to interconnect with each other, and within that, how many changes would there be? In his eyes, there were no secrets in laws. The middle-aged man spoke with a profound meaning. Is that so? After a moment, Fu Jingji regained his senses, and his eyes blossomed with a strange light aura. Fu Jingji hesitated for a moment. Du Ku wants to return to the sacred Saint Galaxy. Will he cooperate with us? This group of people from Purple Cuckoo City, their talents are only ordinary, and their strengths are low, but in such a short period of time, under Ghost Face Mask's hands, they actually improved by leaps and bounds. The white-brow old man's face was gloomy. That woman with the rainbow of laws was once one of Qin Zhen's family generals, but now Qin Zhen is actually not her opponent. And that Su Yi, the patriarch of a small family at the border, but now, he is on par with the Death Servant. Ghost Face Mask himself is even more mysterious. His improvement is so fast that I suspect that he is possessed by Ancestrally. In Purple Cuckoo City, not to mention Qin Zhen, it is said that he is on par with that big man called Ben Senator, but now, even Ji Zhe has been captured by him. Every time I think about it, it makes me unable to eat or sleep in peace. Quickly give it a try. No one would have thought that Du Ku, who was hailed as the number one man of Sin domain, would step on the death path alone and attack the Sin door. To any Sin domain person, the Sin door was like a shackle around their necks, and upon mentioning the Sin door, no one would not clench their teeth. The death path was soaked in blood. which was the blood of generations after generations of Sin domain people. The middle-aged man's eyes flashed with a bright light. He was obviously extremely interested in the army. There were very few legends about Du Ku. He was a genius from an aristocratic family, and revealed his talent from a young age. The Du family's Du city was not considered strong in the four main cities. But following Du Ku's continuous rise in strength, the Du city gradually became the head of the four main cities, and gradually controlled the entire Sin domain. It is truly not easy. The middle-aged man nodded his head. But it is a good support for us. In terms of the art of armies, we are not as good as these outsiders, but in terms of laws, how can they compare to us? This child's talent is unique, and his laws are also strange. The white-brow old man shook his head. Ultimately, this is not the right path. Even if we do not talk about other things, just this group of soldiers, how can it be easy to gather them? He changed the topic. The Su family has put in a lot of effort this time, but from the looks of it, they might not be able to take it down. While he was speaking, Sophie was forced to retreat, and the other three were also covered in dust. They did not have a good time. There were countless of eyes around Galloping Horse City, and at the moment, countless people were watching the battle. Du Ku was the only martial artist who had stepped into the law domain. The white-brow old man was surprised. Tang Tian's awakened god armor actually provided such a possibility. After continuously probing around, Tang Tian finally had a rough idea of the awakened god armor. He knew that he was pressed for time, and naturally could not casually probe around like he usually did. You guys know about armies. Niechio's yin-yang formation is a unique law, and can mobilize everyone's power. I do not know much about armies, but the awakened god armor is more useful for laws, so can I use the awakened god armor to gather everyone's power? What would happen if the power of different law surfaces were to fuse together? Someone would know, because such a thing had never happened before. I never thought that the might of an army could actually reach such a level. One of the old men was surprised. His eyebrows and beard were all white. His white robe was as white as snow. His expression was not angry, but at the moment, he was frowning with a look of worry. The two of them stood up at the same time. Upon saying that, he might as well throw in the towel. Sin domain, this damn place? Who would like it? I don't know what others would think, but I don't think so. Du Ku is already the #1 man in Sin domain. Furthermore, he is not even 70 or 80 years old. Why not give it a try? That's true. Tang Tian scratched his chin, revealing a look of deep thought. High up in the sky, about 20 kilometers away from Galloping Horse City, two figures could be seen. The white-brow old man's frown eased up. That's right. Ji Zhe suddenly spoke out. Upon saying that, he became flustered and exasperated. Damn it! Why am I helping him plan and strategize? Tang Tian's enlightenment on laws was far from reaching the level of a law domain, and even in theory, he knew very little. If he wanted to bring the null division out of Sin domain, there was one person that he had to overcome, the strongest man in Sin domain, Du Ku, who had gained enlightenment on a law domain. Although the awakened god armor was extremely powerful, but it was still unable to form a law domain. Du Ku tried to break through the Sin door. Tang Tian turned to look at Fu Jingji, who also shook his head. His expression was not good. Regardless of whether he cooperates with us or not, we will return to the sacred Saint Galaxy. Tang Tian's tone was resolute and overbearing. If we are able to grasp the profoundness of an army, we will definitely be able to return to the sacred Saint Galaxy. The middle-aged man's eyes revealed a light of ambition, his voice drifting in the air. Fu Jingji revealed a look of suspicion, while Ji Zhe's body trembled, his face revealing a look of shock. The Sin domain has not had any fresh power for a long time. The middle-aged man said. For example, we have personally witnessed how an army operates. With our understanding of laws, I believe that we will not need much time to gain enlightenment on the profoundness. Ever since ancestrally gained enlightenment on laws, after 200 years of development, the Sin domain's studies on laws have reached a bottleneck. If we have the infusion of new blood, our Tao of laws will definitely improve. The two of them understood what it meant if the idea was truly feasible. I'm not familiar with it. Ji shook his head, his expression ugly. I only took a look. That's right. The other man sighed. The studies of military generals have long been lost in the Sin domain. The Sin domain does not have the space for military generals to exist. I never thought that this child would take a different path, and use laws to control them. It is truly exquisite. Seems like it is not that the Sin domain does not have the space for armies, but that we have not found the right path. The white-brow old man choked. Chapter 792. Tang Tian only had a superficial understanding of synchronization, but it gave him inspiration. But the master was able to connect their law surfaces effortlessly. They knew how terrifying the power contained in their law surfaces was, and according to their paths, any one of their law surfaces was enough to cause the master to explode. But the master had swallowed the power of two perfect law surfaces, but there was no change. The sudden inspiration made Tang Tian's eyes light up, and he immediately did it. But Tang Tian was not discouraged. He was sure that even if the three of them gave it their all, they would not be able to reach the domain realm, but they had already broken through the limits of law surfaces. Fu Jingji and Ji Zhe quickly displayed their outstanding abilities. But what if the three of them gave it their all? Can I block it? Tang Tian thought about it, and felt that Du Ku should be able to block it. Law domains were a higher level of power, and although the attacks might have increased, but it was still within the realm of law surfaces. I definitely can't find it. Who would have thought that the three of them would be able to form such a terrifying might with just a casual attack? Compared to the resonance formed from energy synchronization, the resonance between law surfaces was even more astonishing. What if there is more? Pay attention to your control. The power projected by the law surface cannot be too strong, right? A bit weaker. Furthermore, the flowing tassel boat was still parked at the side, with the two large holes on it, constantly reminding the two of the consequences of going against Ghost Face Mask. Isn't that an army? Energy synchronization was the fundamental core of the Sacred Saint Galaxy Army, and law surface synchronization was the fundamental core of the Sin domain army. The green sword threads and blood blade auras in the air disappeared at the same time. Master Ghost Face Mask was like a bridge, connecting the two law surfaces, and the difficulty of it was unfathomable. But what made the two of them feel ashamed was that right from the start, the bridge was extremely stable, and it was the two of them who were in trouble. Tang Tian said coldly, "In a while, I will give the two of you an order. Once you receive it, you will attack." The scene from before continued to replay in his mind. When the two law surfaces started to project their power at the same time, he could clearly feel that there was a mystical resonance between the two law surfaces. But, in front of Tang Tian, the two of them did not dare to complain. After a few days of interaction, he understood that it was very useful to flatter Grimace in his normal state. But against the Ghost Face Mask who was in the awakened state, it was useless. He had to discuss the matter as it stood, and if he asked everything clearly, it would be more effective. Lord Ghost Face Mask's cold gaze caused the two of them to shiver. The two of them immediately understood that this was an order. If Tang Tian was in his usual state, he would be scratching his ears and cheeks, unable to sit still. However, in the awakened state, personal emotions were extremely diluted. After confirming that the plan wouldn't work, he began to think of a new plan. Because of this, a high synchronization rate became synonymous with being well-trained. A 90% synchronization rate was the basic requirement for an outstanding army. It meant that when an order was given, 90% of the soldiers would be able to complete the energy synchronization. The Sin domain was about to change. Tang Tian didn't know what the two were thinking. Even if he knew, he wouldn't care. He didn't intend to reason with them from the beginning. Only a smart person like Qian Hui would be able to do such a thing. She knew her own business and used reason to convince others. As for himself, he would use his fists to convince others. Fu Jingji was even more ruthless than old man Yu. He had ample experience, and was able to use simpler methods to control the situation. And Ji Zhe, who had the name of Bewitching Blade, would often cause people's eyes to light up. His unconstrained and unconstrained techniques were filled with imagination. Suddenly, an indescribable undulation rippled out from their law surfaces. Suddenly, Tang Tian had a flash of understanding. The two of them were unable to imagine it. Their law surfaces had long matured to perfection, and correspondingly, the barriers on their law surfaces were extremely sturdy. In a normal sense, such barriers were practically indestructible, and it was impossible for them to break through them. It was not only him. Fu Jingji and Ji Zhe, who regained their senses, looked at each other. They could see the deep shock, fear, and an indescribable anticipation in each other's eyes. Fu Jingji held onto two jade-green wooden short swords, which were the famous green swords. The moment the undulation appeared, the green swords in his hands shot out a jade-green light. A light regiment that was as intense as the sun suddenly blossomed, causing the two of them to be blinded by white light, unable to see anything. The terrifying shock wave swept out like a storm. The destructive aura caused the two of them to turn pale. How many people could withstand such a terrifying attack? Even if it was himself, facing such an attack, it would not be easy. And if such a powerful attack was just the enemy's normal attack, Tang Tian felt that his chances of victory were minuscule. The resonance between the two caused the originally repulsive powers to instantly fuse together, and the might that it released was beyond imagination. The two of them were suspicious, but they made preparations. Connecting their law surfaces was proven to be feasible. Tang Tian did not believe that such a connection would be useless. All right, the situation is stronger than us. The two of them continued to numb themselves. One more time. Exactly what level has Master's understanding of laws reached? After a few seconds, their vision returned to normal, and the scene in front of them caused the two of them to freeze in place, unable to move. That's impossible. How can two completely different law powers fuse together? Tang Tian tried to fuse the two powers together, but he quickly realized that it was not possible. The two astonishing powers were clearly separated inside the God-awakened armor. And Tang Tian realized that it was extremely difficult to control the two powers. With such a casual attack, they could unleash it continuously for an entire night. Suddenly, he thought of something that was both familiar and strange at the same time. Synchronization rate. Doesn't that mean that I can build a true Sin domain army? Fu Jingji and Ji Zhe's bodies trembled, their faces revealing looks of disbelief. The power was once again injected into their law surfaces. I actually accidentally found the crux to building a Sin domain army. When 10 law surfaces resonated at the same time, what kind of scene would it be? When 100 law surfaces resonated at the same time, what kind of scene would it be? The two of them had pale white faces. Their eyes were blank as they stared blankly at the foot of the mountain that was left. The charred surface revealed a red light. It was the melted rocks that had not cooled down, showing how terrifying the temperature was. At the same time, Ji Zhe also unleashed his own blade aura. The blade in his hand was long and curved. The dark red lines on the blade's body looked like waves of blood, and the blade aura that he unleashed was also dark red like blood. The towering mountain outside the city had disappeared. Tang Tian's eyes suddenly lit up. The two law surfaces were activated at the same time. An indescribable undulation was transmitted into his body, and the awakened armor on his body suddenly lit up. The same undulation as before appeared on both of their law surfaces at the same time. This time, the two of them did not hesitate and made their moves at the same time. This is contrary to what the two of them had guessed. In truth, it was the awakened armor that was withstanding the power of their law surfaces. Tang Tian realized that he had underestimated the usefulness of the awakened armor. To be able to withstand such an astonishing power, the awakened armor's potential was far greater than what he had expected. Not only did the energy undulate, in truth, the power projected by the law surfaces also had undulations. Energy synchronization is able to unleash an even more astonishing might. Then, if the power projected by the law surfaces is also synchronized, what kind of scene will that be? Fusion. Synchronization was a term commonly used by armies. It was usually used to measure the synchronization of energy undulations between soldiers. The higher the synchronization, the more power the energy could unleash. Synchronization was a goal that all military generals pursued, and it was something that ran through all of their daily training. Behind the awakened armor's mask, Tang Tian's eyes were extremely bright. The two of them were extremely conflicted, and even they themselves did not know what was going on. The two of them more or less understood how powerful Master Ghost Face Mask's theory was, and it would be a lie to say that they were not attracted to it. But one of them was a tyrant, while the other was a ferocious person, and to be tossed around like that, it was impossible for them to not be angry. What kind of attack? Jizai asked. Teach us this. Under their shocked gazes, the green and red blade aura entered the mountain peak outside the city. Bang! Unbeknownst to them, the shock that Tang Tian had given them was even more intense. The two of them looked as though they had seen a ghost. A high-level power against a low-level power would usually crush them. That was nothing, but when they tried to transfer their power to the Master, the result caused them to be dumbstruck. Master Ghost Face Mask was like a bottomless ocean, and the power that they transferred was like a clay ox entering the ocean, until the two of them transferred all of the power that their law surface could project. Master Ghost Face Mask still did not have any reaction. I should be able to block it. That's right, it's resonance. Again. How many years has it been since I have to crawl around in the mud? Jizai was still alright, even though he was arrogant, but his strength did not drop from the sky, but had been through bitter training. Fu Jingji was in a much more difficult situation. He had held a high position for many years, and although he was strong, he had been pampered for many years, causing him to complain in his heart. Disappeared. With Fu Jingji and Jizai's strength, it was not difficult for them to destroy a mountain peak. But to make a mountain peak disappear into thin air like that was not so easy. And furthermore, it was just a casual attack from the two of them. And at the same time, a jade-green light wrapped around the blood blade aura appeared in their vision. Tang Tian thought for a moment and said, "The attack that you are most proficient in. Why aren't we attacking? What about Dooku, who is hailed as Sin Domain's #1? When one's strength was a level higher, its might would not be multiplied, but oftentimes, it would be increased by 10 times, or even 100 times. Their previous thoughts were proven to be useless one after another. The awakened state Tang Tian was brimming with pressure, as though he was a demon god. His indifferent eyes seemed to be able to see through people's hearts. The two of their attacks had actually fused together. The two of them jumped in fright. Tang Tian ignored the two of them. He was carefully sensing the two completely different powers. Focus, maintain your stability. Furthermore, adding him, there were only 3 of them. Tang Tian's eyes were as bright as stars. He had put in countless of hard work and had never admitted defeat. He firmly believed that he would fight to the end. He was filled with confidence, but only at that moment did he truly find the key to victory. Chapter 793. But only when they were licking their wounds did they realize that if Mei Chen Xiu succeeded, it would be extremely important to the entire war. Using our flesh and blood as sharp blades, we will turn this place into a slaughterhouse. No one can escape. Our target is the Shang continent. Chiu Su Hua said without hesitation. Including me, the achievements and ambitions of conquering the southern region has blinded our eyes. This defeat is not a loss at all, and it has allowed us to see our current situation clearly. Everyone, even if we have to bear the name of failure, even if we do not have any achievements, even if we have to sacrifice all of us, we will hold back 2 gold-rank armies." As expected, the commander of the Sacred Pagoda army did not waste the opportunity. Without hesitation, they invested all of their strength and counterattacked. He stood up and looked at his generals, and said solemnly, "This battle will be the starting point for our honorable martial continent to unify the sacred Saint Galaxy. We can only win and not lose. Everyone below me can be sacrificed. Everyone below me, anyone who retreats will be killed." Warship weapons were extremely expensive, especially those used by gold-rank armies. They were of a higher grade than ordinary warship weapons, and thus were extremely expensive. Hearing that the White Crow Army's warships were equipped with warship weapons that were 1.5 times their own, everyone was stunned. They had experienced the might of the White Crow Army's warships, and knew that the opponent's warship weapons were of the same grade as theirs. War was a battle of money, but the undefeatable Chiu Su Hua actually lost. That's right, he was helpless. Chiu Su Hua had lost 30,000 men, of which only 8,000 were lost during the stalemate, and these 8,000 men had at least brought about 15,000 casualties to the opponent. At least 20,000 casualties came from the appearance of the White Crow Army. Chiu Su Hua's expression did not change. "Continue. The White Crow Army's equipment is better than ours, but he only has 1 army. I was too careless this time, and made the mistake of underestimating the enemy." When Chiu Su Hua spoke, everyone's heart trembled, and all of them lowered their heads. They were all silver-grade warship weapons, but the difference in might was huge, and silver-grade was just a general term. The same honeycomb sword cannon, produced by different weapon manufacturers, had completely different standards. The frequency of attack, the might of the sword aura would be as different as heaven and earth. As for those large battleship weapons, they were more complex and refined. Battleship weapons were more powerful, took up less space, and required less people to operate them. The 2 sides engaged in a fierce battle in the energy sea that was more than 800 kilometers wide. The 2 sides fought for several days, coming and going, falling into a stalemate. Chiu Su Hua did not panic, although he was young, but he had rich battle experience, and knew that in such a large-scale battle, there would be a few tough bones. The honorable martial continent was filled with famed generals, and Mei Chen Xiu was as many as the hairs on a cow. Madame Ro valued his talents and promoted him to be the commander-in-chief of the White Pirates, which was a rare sight. Madame Ro's identity as an intelligence officer had very little influence on the military. They were 2 completely different systems. His fist slammed on the conference table. His handsome face became ferocious, and his red eyes were bloodshot. What a pity! Mei Chen Xiu's surprise attack on the Steel Mountain continent failed. The Sacred Pagoda army had a total of 190,000 men, while Chiu Su Hua had 150,000 men. Someone in the conference room muttered, and many people looked annoyed. They had received Mei Chen Xiu's plan to ambush the Steel Mountain continent, but no one cared about it. They were filled with confidence, relying on the strength in their hands. They could completely suppress their opponent. It is said that the Shang continent produces a unique black gold, which is a good material for crafting warship weapons. But can the black gold be used to craft such high-grade warship weapons? We do not have such information. Ziche Jiajing spoke up. Looking at the overall situation, it is not important whether we win or lose. In comparison, the southern region, which had been peaceful and prosperous for too long, was missing too many lessons in this area. The Sacred Pagoda army had many allies, but among these armies, they lacked a unified command, and their coordination was chaotic, and they fought for themselves. Ziche Jiajing's voice was gentle, but it was akin to dropping a bomb in the conference room. Some of them revealed looks of shame, while others were unconvinced. After a short period of silence, everyone's faces became extremely ugly. When a few of the generals heard Chiu Su Hua's words, they wanted to speak up, but Chiu Su Hua waved his hand to stop them, and said solemnly, "We do not have to care about the moment of victory or loss. The important thing is that we can find a solution before we lose." Everyone knows what this battle means to the entire Honorable Marshall Continent. Since when did the Honorable Marshall Continent lose out in terms of money? Chiu Su-hua, who was of a similar age to Mei Chen-xiu, regardless of whether it was his achievements or reputation, he was much higher. Chiu Su-hua was the youngest out of the 5 great generals, and his talent caused everyone to be shocked. Many people thought that he was the most outstanding general in the history of the Honorable Marshall Continent. He was not even 30 years old, and had outstanding military achievements, and as one of the 5 great generals, he was the one that attracted the most attention. Even at that moment, Ziche Jiajing's voice was gentle and soft, causing the generals who were initially unconvinced to reveal looks of contemplation. Mu Zhixia's perseverance, his arrangements for the past 10 years, gave people the feeling that he was extremely responsible. Regardless of whether it was offense or defense, Moxin was extremely skillful. He did not seem to have any shortcomings. His balance and stability were his specialties, but at the same time, there were very few outstanding battles. Jia was hailed as the #1 defender in the Sacred Saint Galaxy, with a conservative and low-profile personality. He lived in seclusion. Goqing Wundao liked to attack unpredictably. His attacks were terrifying, but he was temperamental and ruthless, and was not liked by others. Wei Yu shook his head. These warship weapons might not be made of black gold. The Southern Alliance still has the Suji Worldwide Commerce, which is hailed as one of the top 5 weapon merchants in the southern region. It is completely possible for them to manufacture and purchase these warship weapons. Although the southern region people think that we are here to conquer the southern region, and even we ourselves think so, but I need to remind everyone that from the start, our target has always been the Shang continent. But, just as Chiu Su-hua thought that victory was in his grasp, an army suddenly appeared like a ghost at the side of their fleet. When Chiu Su-hua realized that it was the White Crow Army, the situation had already gone out of control. The White Crow Army did not look like a rookie at all. They were experienced butchers, and knew every single detail of their target. Who would have thought that they had just risen to become a gold-rank army? Chiu Su-hua's eyes were like stars, he said calmly. Winning or losing does not matter. But in this battle, there will only be one victor, and that is the Honorable Marshall Continent. When Chiu Su-hua's side started to show signs of collapse, he immediately ordered his direct subordinated army to retreat. And at that moment, one of his generals, Feng Yunman, took the initiative to bring up the rear, and won the opportunity for the main army. Upon thinking about the damned White Crow Army, Chiu Su-hua's face turned green. The armies of the Honorable Marshall Continent were famed for their superior equipment, which allowed them to gain an advantage when fighting against their enemies. As for the gold-rank warship weapons, only Chiu Su-hua and the few generals under him were equipped with them, and their price was not just expensive. Chiu Su-hua had encountered the Allied army with the Sacred Pagoda Army as the core, and both parties were in a stalemate, which was extremely bitter. The Sacred Pagoda Army was one of the 3 great gold-rank armies in the southern region, and compared to the Southern Wind Army, which was also a gold-rank army, the Sacred Pagoda Army was much more tenacious. The White Crow Army did not have many people, but their fighting strength was extremely powerful. To Chiu Su-hua, they were even stronger than the Sacred Pagoda Army. All of their warships are equipped with excess warship weapons, and according to the analysis of the images, the warship weapons they are equipped with are twice of the Sacred Pagoda Army, and 1.5 times of ours. Everyone had heard of the Shang continent producing black gold that was suitable for manufacturing warship weapons, but no one had thought that the black gold could actually produce such high-grade warship weapons. Chiu Su-hua was handsome on the outside. He came from a prestigious family. His speech and actions were elegant and calm. He was brimming with talent, and had long become the idol in the hearts of countless honorable Martial Continent citizens, and became the most dazzling general of the honorable Martial Continent. The Sacred Pagoda Army's tenacity was admirable. If not for them, the Allied Army's defensive line would be in imminent danger. But as time passed, the Allied Army that had more people started to lose the advantage. The Fox of the Southern Region, Bai Yu, became famous in one battle. Ziche Jiajing's expression returned to normal. His words immediately attracted everyone's attention. Many of them revealed looks of dissatisfaction. Could it be that we came all the way to the Southern Region, not to win, but to lose? The number of warship weapons that every warship is equipped with is 1.5 times of ours. Their attacks were extremely ferocious and resolute, and the normal armies that had average fighting strength immediately crumbled under their attacks. All of the generals' expressions became solemn. All of them were stirred up and immediately agreed. Yes. In such a stalemate situation, Chiu Su Hua knew what the collapse of his own flank meant. Mei Chen Xiu's death did not cause much of a ripple in the various armies of the honorable Martial Continent. The loss of 30,000 men, to the 150,000-strong army, was already a huge blow, but what truly pained Chiu Su Hua was the death of his subordinate, Feng Yunman. That is not the reason for our defeat. The one who spoke was one of the famed generals under Chiu Su Hua, Ziche Jiajing. Ziche Jiajing had a tall and skinny figure, his brown hair casually draped over his shoulders. He had an androgynous, handsome and beautiful face. His expression was calm, but his gentle voice revealed a sense of helplessness. At the start of the war, we were unstoppable, causing us to lose our vigilance, and have even more unsuitable ambitions, causing us to deviate greatly from our highest strategic goal. If we are able to attract the Sacred Pagoda and White Crows, the two remaining gold rank armies in the southern region, causing them to be unable to reinforce the Shang continent, then the resistance that General Go Qing Wendao has to face will be greatly reduced. It will be beneficial for us to seize the Shang continent. Furthermore, he held the upper hand. Other than the direct subordinated army, he still had a large number of conventional armies. These conventional armies were far weaker than the direct subordinated armies, but ants could bite an elephant to death. To equip the direct subordinated armies with conventional armies, as well as the coordination between the armies, was a rule that the honorable Martial Continent had created after going through many wars. The rules that were exchanged for blood were currently displaying astonishing might. Chapter 794. Pring Ruo suddenly spoke out. You are from the Southern Alliance, and saving the Shang continent is your responsibility. If you need to leave, please come to my tribe as soon as possible. I will fight for an opportunity for you to leave. There were good places to attack along the entire line of defense, so why should they go for the enemy's strongest point and clash head-on? He knew that the Shang continent's defensive line would definitely be under immense pressure, but he was the least worried about the Ocean Guardian stronghold. When a fortress fell into the hands of a fellow like Xie Yuan who was good at defense, the power it could unleash was definitely beyond imagination. Beside Bai Yu, Guanjin also revealed a look of approval. He knew very well how good this old classmate of his was at defensive positions. When he was in the academy, Xie Yuan's defensive assignment had given all the teachers a headache. It was to the point that every time Bai Yu asked Xie Yuan to help him with his homework, he would remind him to only use half of his strength, and to leave at least 5 flaws. Pang Ruo's hair was white and his face was weathered. His body was tall and sturdy. One could imagine that when he was young, he must have been a towering man. He had been the commander of the Sacred Pagoda Army for over 30 years, and had an extremely high reputation in the southern region. He was full of confidence in Xie Yuan. He did not know if Xie Yuan was the third best defender in the sanctuary, but he believed that his old classmate was definitely the best in the world when it came to setting up defenses. Bai Yu himself would definitely not touch Xie Yuan, who had a stronghold. The Fox of the Southern Territory lives up to its name. On behalf of the Allied forces, I would like to thank you for your assistance. Shang continent? The old general looked at Bai Yu in surprise. Not Suji worldwide commerce. We have to trust him. Bai Yu took a deep breath and gritted his teeth. Even if it is Go Qing Wendao, we have to believe in old Xie. And don't forget about Bing, that old and cunning fellow, will definitely not sit and watch old Xie suffer. It is the Shang continent. Bai Yu explained. Black gold is a special product of the Shang continent, although it is supplied to the Suji worldwide commerce, but it does not limit their production, but this new type of warship weapon originates from the Sword Forest stronghold. The people of the Shang continent are also proficient in creating weapons, and I personally believe that their standards are higher than the Suji worldwide commerce, but they do not sell them. But Peng Ruo's expression did not change, but deep in his eyes, a trace of surprise flashed past. His tone was still calm. You are very confident in the Shang continent. But Go Qing Wendao had the worst record out of the 5 great generals. Yes. Bai Yu said calmly, they are the most outstanding group of people I have ever seen. Thank you for your kindness. He suddenly laughed. The Shang continent does not need my help. I am more interested in turning this place into Chiu Su Hua's grave. Bai Yu started to worry. Peng Ruo's lips twitched. He didn't like being overly convoluted, so he got straight to the point. What about Ma Xin? If it was any other normal person, they would definitely not touch the Ocean Guardian stronghold, a stronghold that was guarded by the 3rd most famous general under the heavens. Why did you always feel that that guy would always have a way? We can no longer leave. Bai Yu revealed a bitter smile. This time, Chiu Su Hua is determined to not let us go. Chiu Su Hua even used a third of his strength to deal with the White Crow army. Peng Ruo was very clear about the state of the battlefield. Chiu Su Hua's speed of turning back and killing caused everyone to jump in shock. Before they could celebrate their hard-won victory, they had to welcome the battle. Bai Yu noticed Guan Jin's strange expression and asked, "What's wrong?" But this seemingly illogical choice, in Go Qing Wendao's hands, was extremely normal. Bai Yu sucked in a breath of cold air. It was a ruthless move. Chiu Su Hua led 80,000 men, contending with the 150,000 allied army, and was not at a disadvantage. And his subordinate, General Wei Yu, led 40,000 men, and firmly stuck to the White Crow army. Peng Ruo, who had obtained the recommendation letter, left satisfied. As the commander-in-chief of the Allied army, he never had to worry about money. The southern region's business atmosphere was extremely rich, and the amount of funds he could use was beyond imagination. As for transportation, it was not a problem, although they needed to take a big detour and enter the Shang continent from the back, but for a long drawn-out battle, they could make it in time. It was Go Qing Wendao. The worry on Guan Jin's face did not lessen. He knew that Yu had a blind trust in the Shang continent's commander-in-chief. Mu Jixia had been stationed in the Wei Yiguan continent for many years, and had fought with the savage continent many times in the beginning, and rarely suffered losses. And Jia Ye, who was proficient in defense, suffered even fewer losses. Chiu Su Hua had suffered in the first few battles, but after that, he rose to the top. As for Mo Xin, who always pursued the most logical choice, he had never lost. It's actually the Shang continent. Guan Jin bit his lips and squeezed out a sentence. They need support. I am happy to be of service. Bai Yu bowed. If it was any other military general attacking the Ocean Guardian stronghold, he would not be so worried. Regardless if it was Chiu Su Hua or Mo Xin, once they understood that it was impossible, they would definitely not waste the lives of their soldiers. But in Go Qing Wendao's dictionary, there was no such thing as impossible. Guan Jin felt that if the Sword Forest stronghold developed warships, it would definitely be very powerful. Did he really make arrangements long ago? Let him be. Bai Yu opened his mouth. His lazy nature was about to surface, but seeing the meticulous old general in front of him, he immediately corrected his attitude. We are fighting on our home ground and have the geographical advantage, so the first thing we should consider is to kill or injure the enemy's strength. I hope that they will do as you say." The old general nodded his head. He did not harp on the question, and changed the topic. "The warship weapons that your esteemed unit is equipped with are extremely refined. I wonder if you are willing to support us?" "We are willing to purchase them." The old general looked at Bai Yu in front of him, a look of admiration flashing past his eyes. Suddenly, Guan Jin's face changed. His subordinates' faces changed. They naturally understood the meaning behind Peng Ruo's words. If they wanted to drag the White Crow army out of the swamp, they needed an army to block Wei Yu, and that was no different from using their own bodies to block the blade for the White Crow army. Bai Yu's heart surged with a trace of respect. He knew that it was not easy for the old general to say such words at such a critical moment. "You're overpraising me. This junior was just lucky," Bai Yu said respectfully. "But a pity, they are not interested in building warships." Compared to the other 4 years old, Goqing Wendao's defeat was extremely glaring, but he was the enemy that all the generals were most unwilling to meet. The members of the Southern Alliance were not unfamiliar to them, but in terms of weapons, everyone subconsciously thought that it was the Suji worldwide commerce. Furthermore, warship weapons were far more complicated than ordinary weapons. Many people in the Allied army suspected that Bai Yu had already arrived at the battlefield, but did not launch an attack, and watched as the Allied army went to their deaths. He viewed offense as his life, and was temperamental, ruthless and crazy. Goqing Wendao would always reveal all sorts of flaws in battle, but he did not care about it. What he believed in was that before he was beaten into a sieve, he would first beat the enemy into a sieve. Even in a desperate situation, his first reaction was always to attack. When fighting against him, one could never think of escaping unscathed, and had to always be prepared to receive a blade. As Bai Yu's adjutant, he was in charge of the procurement of weapons. At that time, Bai Yu had suggested to use warship weapons produced by the Shang continent, but was vehemently opposed by him. It was only until the test samples were sent over, and after repeated tests, that he realized that the Shang continent, which was not famous in the weapon domain, actually possessed such outstanding technology. All of these voices were suppressed by the old general. Bai Yu's timing was perfect, and the result was perfect. He was an outstanding general. Furthermore, Bai Yu was not under his jurisdiction, and should not be blamed. Towards the clumsy performance of the Allied army, the old general was already unhappy. The might of the warship weapons of the White Crow army had already been proven on the battlefield. Every warship of the White Crow army was like a porcupine covered with spikes. Their powerful fighting capabilities left a deep impression on the old general. Bai Yu looked at Peng Ruo's back view as he left, and scratched his chin. "For such a large order, I need to ask for a commission from the Sword Forest stronghold. Old official, how much do you think I should ask for? How about 10%? If not, the teacher would be able to tell with one look who wrote the assignment." "No." Bai Yu unexpectedly shook his head. "Continue with our previous strategy." The White Crow army that had completed the change in equipment had a huge increase in fighting capabilities. He would forever attack in a frenzy, and would either cause his head to bleed, or cause the enemy's head to bleed. What left a deeper impression on him was that every warship of the White Crow army was equipped with warship weapons, which were actually twice of theirs. The size of the warships of both parties did not have much of a difference, and that could only mean one thing, that the warship weapons of the opponent greatly reduced the number of people required to control them. The entire Bai Yu army who had tasted the benefits were filled with anticipation towards the Shang continent's weapons. Peng Ruo nodded his head. He agreed with Bai Yu's thoughts, and asked another question. "What does your esteemed unit plan to do next?" "Nothing much," Guan Jin said impolitely. "Compared to the commission, we should be more concerned about whether the Sword Forest stronghold has produced any new weapons. Their efficiency has always been astonishing. Goqing Wendao is personally attacking the Ocean Guardian stronghold." Guan Jin's face turned pale white. I think I need a recommendation letter, Peng Ruo said to Bai Yu. That's right. They are a group of lunatics, Bai Yu immediately said. They will definitely have something good. We need to send people to ask. His respect was not fake. The Sacred Pagoda Army had a long history, and the upright and unyielding Peng Ruo was a person of virtue and prestige. When Bai Yu was still in school, Peng Ruo's many classic battles were often studied and discussed by them. The sudden appearance of the White Crow Army was not only unexpected by Chiu Su Hua, but Peng Ruo did not expect it either. After that, the White Crow Army's performance was also impeccable, causing the experienced old general to be shocked. Their grasp of timing, their decisiveness in launching attacks, as well as their powerful and sharp fighting capabilities, quickly defeated Chiu Su Hua's army. Bai Yu was startled for a moment, but quickly reacted. I am sorry, but we do not have many supplies. If your esteemed side wishes to purchase them, I am willing to act as a middleman, but your esteemed side will need to organize your own fleet to the Shang continent. If it was just him alone, it would not be scary, but what was scarier was that he had a group of crazy and bloodthirsty lunatics, his direct subordinate army. Chapter 795. No one was clearer than Lu Xingxiang about the might of the lightning auras that enveloped their bodies. He had never thought that there would be a day where someone could use their body to withstand the lightning auras. They truly have the body of a wild beast. No, even if a wild beast is enveloped by the dense lightning auras, they would not be able to survive. The few fellows who were charging at the very front were completely oblivious to it. Lu Xingxiang could even see their muscles twitching under the stimulation of the electricity. However, this group of people didn't seem to feel anything. Their faces were ferocious as they continued to madly rush forward with their bodies covered in electricity. Su Yi also stared at the death servant. The dense death aura and the greedy look in his eyes made him understand the other party's intentions. To Nie Chio's side, they did not lack fighting spirit. Upon seeing Qin Zhen, Gu Shui's eyes revealed killing intent. The pain of her soul being imprisoned had caused the strong young lady to suffer a huge injury. Although with Tang Tian's help, she had used the power of the injury to break through again. But the injury had disappeared, but the pain had not been forgotten, and the hatred was still there. Ping Xiaoshan's initial job was to cut the golden steel gravel, but Nie Chio could not tolerate any idlers in his team, so he was pulled to participate in the training. Ping Xiaoshan was not as arrogant as Xiao Han Guang, and did not have any resistance to participating in the training, and after seeing the ferocious fellows every day, his eyes were already red. The waves of attacks brought with them a terrifying stickiness. Upon contact, one would only be devoured. Lu Xingxiang's expression remained the same, but his heart sunk. The dazzling lightning aura enveloped his entire body, and the thick silver snakes danced around. Zzz. Amaury did not notice that his thoughts already had a tinge of seniority. Kill! His gaze locked onto Lu Xingxiang. The floating balls of lightning popped one after another like bubbles. Lu Xingxiang snorted. He raised his right palm, and a large lightning ball floated out. The dazzling lightning balls were extremely glaring, and a terrifying aura enveloped the area. The lightning balls were all around 1 m in diameter, and the concentrated crackling sounds came out. Lu Xingxiang revealed a pleased look, although the opponent's attack method made him feel a headache, but if he wanted to leave, they would not be able to stop him. The final attack was also part of his plan. See? Lu Xingxiang's eyes were sharp. He quickly understood the reason behind it. They used numbers to make up for the flaws left behind after a full-strength slash. Their slashes would never exist alone. As long as the enemy was hit by one slash, they would instantly fall into a frenzy of slashes. This group of fellows were like a swarm of bees. They were in groups and had great teamwork. As long as they were hit by one slash, the other team members would follow up with more slashes. And in this shockingly short period of time, the nearby squads had already completed their attack preparations, and they would seamlessly join in when their companions finished their first wave of attacks. Some of them froze and stopped in their tracks. As long as he destroyed this hole, Lu Xingxiang would not be able to escape. Wouldn't that create an opportunity for Suramauri? The battle had reached its climax right from the start. However, in the hands of this group of people, this was the most common method of attack. He no longer hesitated and used the last of his strength, causing the lightning around his body to surge. The physical bodies of this group of fellows had actually been tempered to this extent. There were less than half of his brothers standing behind him, but it was enough. Although the old man still had a lot of thunderballs, but Amauri could sense that the aura of the thunderballs was weakening. He immediately chose to fight with numbers, but he quickly realized that it was not a good choice. He increased the number of thunderballs, causing the might of the thunderballs to decrease greatly, but the opponent was actually able to use his body to take it. And what made him even more panicked was the exhaustion. His strength was being exhausted at a speed that far exceeded his imagination. What can I do? The thunder balls became sluggish, and before they could explode, the continuous slashes arrived. In the blink of an eye, the thunder balls had suffered 5 slashes, and like a balloon that was leaking air, it suddenly shrunk, it transformed into a lightning aura that extended along the few large guillotines. Lu Xingxiang's hair stood on end. But when he neared the hole, Ping Xiaoshan realized that his actions were somewhat impulsive. He had not gained enlightenment on his law surface, and facing Lu Xingxiang, who was a martial artist on the list of powerhouses, he was as insignificant as an ant. Even though Lu Xingxiang's strength was exhausted, it was still extremely easy for him to destroy him. His figure was once again hidden in the ball of lightning. Lu Xingxiang's law surface's power was quickly being consumed, and his face became uglier. He glanced at Sophie, who was fighting in the distance, and his expression changed. If I escape at this time, then the Lu family who are relying on others will be destroyed. But if I die, the Lu family who did not have a martial artist on the list of powerhouses will be thrown away like a rag. And as long as he did not die, a martial artist with fighting strength would be of some value to the big families. It was as though there was an invisible hand that was accurately controlling the swarm of bees. The death thumb ring, to any person who trained in death laws, was a sacred object that they yearned for even in their dreams. But to Su Yi, it was not only a treasure for training, but had even more meaning: to struggle free from the death god's hands and regain life. Facing such a favor, the prideful Su Yi did not hesitate and made the decision to use his life to repay the favor. If we were to say that the perverted bodies of these people made him feel that it was inconceivable, then the way they attacked gave him an incomparable shock. Not good. His face changed. Am I going to die? Is this the legendary army? The old man did not have much strength left. No matter how skilled a martial artist was in defense, against such a ferocious and unending attack, they would only be able to hold on for a moment. Their angle of attack was obviously meticulously arranged, and was extremely crafty. That idiot was killed by the great Amauri. His eyes stared at the expanding hole, and his eyes lit up. Just at that moment, his eyes suddenly saw a fine black thread connecting to the black hole, that is, spatial law thread. What do I do? Using the undulations produced from breaking space as a cover, he quietly activated his spatial law thread, and instantly appeared near the hole that he had just broken. On the other side of the black thread was a skinny figure, who grinned at him. Bang bang bang! He did not know what the outcome would be, but he knew that it would cause the space to become chaotic. He opened his eyes wide, but he was not afraid at all, but excited. The thunder balls in front of him made him think of Lu Tianwan. The intense lightning aura caused the space in front of him to change, and a black dot in the blazing light expanded rapidly. Amauri did not care about the lightning aura swimming around his entire body. Other than the numbness, he did not receive any major injuries. Behind him were the first batch of Null Division members that were rescued. They had trained in the heavy demonic execution for the longest time, and had absorbed a large amount of life origin essence from the golden steel gravel, and after going through the intense tempering, their physiques had reached a new height. The blazing lightning exploded. In the next moment, Ping Xiaoshan's mind was in a mess. The distance between each of them was obviously meticulously calculated. Their slashes were extremely ferocious. Other than the unique technique to unleash power, the other reason was that they were using all of their strength. To unleash all of their strength without holding back, as a normal attack, it was against logic. Because they had no leeway, upon failure, the opponent's counterattack was enough to kill them. Unless it was a desperate situation, Lu Xingxiang rarely saw such a desperate attack. It was Ping Xiaoshan. After living in an army for a long time, Ping Xiaoshan had changed greatly. The originally weak and cowardly Ping Xiaoshan had also become more manly. When Ping Xiaoshan saw Lu Xingxiang's lightning breaking through space, he immediately realized that it was his chance, and in a rush, he launched his attack. Under the immense pressure, the extremely anxious Ping Xiaoshan forced himself to calm down. What did the commander usually say? In an army, we never set individual victory as the goal. Everyone has their own use, and through proper coordination, we can defeat our opponents. He licked his lips, a fierce glint flashing in his eyes. He trained in spatial laws, and Nie Qiu treated him as an ambush, and even specially arranged a few tactics for him. Qin Zhen and Lu Xingxiang had an irreconcilable hatred with them, and when they met, their eyes would turn red. Sophie, who came from the Su family, also understood that to the Su family, it was a battle that they could only win. The death servant's gaze never left the death thumb ring in Su Ye's hand. One after another, blurred figures spread out like a tide, moving extremely fast. The moment he summoned the lightning ball, they rushed into it. The enemy could take the death thumb ring from his corpse. Other than that, there was no other way. Spatial law threads quietly connected to the whole. Suddenly, his eyes constricted. Not good, the old man is running. An extremely thick and solid lightning aura, like a silver lightning spear, instantly struck a Maori. Others could not do anything to the broken space, but Ping Xiaoshan, who trained in spatial laws, knew that the broken space was not as stable as everyone thought it was. Every time the door-sized guillotine slashed down, it would be earth-shattering. And their ferocious aura caused people's minds to tremble. Lu Xingxiang glanced at them coldly, and extended his finger out towards a Maori. Suddenly, the expanding black hole in front of him rippled. Continuous explosions of light auras pierced through the night sky. The resplendent light aura reflected on Nie Qiu's pale and delicate face. The corner of his mouth curled up, as though he had a card up his sleeve. But his forehead was covered in perspiration, showing that he was also operating to the extreme. A Maori who was running frantically changed. He roared. His body suddenly became blurry. His speed increased explosively, and like a shadow, he rushed towards Lu Xingxiang. The old man looked ordinary, but his strength was much stronger than the lunatic Lu Tianwen. It was evident from the large number of people behind him that had fallen. All of them were comrades that they had just rescued, and were not used to such a method of fighting. Since they were not going to die, it was good for them to suffer a bit, and the group of wolf cubs would train hard. The burly man at the very front borrowed the momentum of his charge, and slashed at a thunderball without any fancy moves. But, Chapter 796. No, it's two. Dooku shook his head. The death servant was fought by Su Yi. The two of them are of equal strength, and Su Yi has the help of the death thumb ring, so he has the advantage. Qin Zhen was killed by a woman. This woman wielded a sword and used a slashing technique. Every time she slashed, rainbows would appear. I think that the Purple Cuckoo City's rainbow phenomenon has something to do with her. The ones who fell to the Null Division were Lu Xingxiang and Sophie. Although it was just a possibility, but the impact on Fu Jingji caused him to be unable to sleep. When Fu Jingji gradually regained his senses, He quickly realized that it was an extremely good opportunity. This was subversion. How did they do it? Du Xian you could not help but ask. He had to hurry. He waved his hand. Strictly according to the standards provided by the Lord, he carefully selected 20 people. Fu Jingji's face was flushed red. He would berate from time to time, but did his job with all his heart. Upon thinking about Master Ghost Face Mask's plan, he was filled with motivation. For a long time, the Sin domain had a common understanding, and that was that absolute martial artists who had gained enlightenment on law domains could not be defeated by relying on numbers. Only a domain realm master could defeat a domain realm master. Everyone, hold on for a while more. I have already found a way out of Sin domain. Wait for me. Du Xian you quickly thanked the shopkeeper. The shopkeeper waved his hand and left in satisfaction. Du Ku had never looked down on his sister's intelligence. His face did not show any signs of fear from having his power shaken. Instead, he was full of praise. It's simply amazing. Their coordination and usage of power is beyond imagination. Although they had only gained enlightenment on law threads, their physiques were tyrannical. Their moves were simple, but they were powerful and heavy. Their attacks were like the tide, wave after wave, so fast that it was too much for the eyes to take in. Lu Xingxiang was forcefully worn down. Sophie is the same. Although her opponent's attacks are sharp, in essence there's no difference. The Su family has lost, Du Ku said. Sin Domain's first army, an epic-making product, a monster that toppled the laws of Sin Domain. But, today was an exception. The boss smiled and gave them a plate of fried beans. This was because of Miss Du Xianyu. That's right. Du Ku did not avoid it at all. Your laws are naturally suited for this type of fighting style. How is it, Sin Domain's first army, how cool. He had surrendered to Ghost Face Mask previously because he was forced to do so. Fu Jingji did not think highly of Ghost Face Mask. He knew how unfathomable the strength of the 4 main cities were. Although Ghost Face Mask and his Null Division were powerful, but to fight against the entire Sin Domain, they had no chance of winning. I will be your assistant. Du Ku's words were shocking. He had his own unique way of thinking about the army. Most of them cultivated in ordinary laws and inheritances, causing them to be unable to enter the list of powerhouses. But in a small family, they were still strong enough to be the pillars. Du Xianyu asked, what method do they use to make up for the difference in cultivation level? Everyone, stand properly. Sin Domain's first army's senior elder, just thinking about it made him excited. No, it was the first elder. Ji Zhe was not interested in the army, and a diligent subordinate like him was what the master truly needed. That bright and dazzling future made him indescribably excited. Master Ghost Face Mask's heart had never been in the Sin Domain. Something must have happened for his elder brother to treat him to tea. The Sin Domain only had one ruler, and that was Du Ku, who was holding onto a big bowl of tea. In name, the 4 main cities were the rulers of the Sin Domain, but in truth, it was just Du Ku who disliked politics, who shared the authority with them. I'll pay the bill. Until yesterday, when the master brought him and Ji Zhe to complete the law surface resonance, the astonishing might displayed made him understand that the Sin Domain was about to change. He did not know if it was an army, or how powerful Du Ku who had gained enlightenment on a law domain was, but he felt that if he formed an army to challenge Du Ku, they would have a chance. What about you? Du Xianyu asked. What are you squeezing for? Du Xianyu continued to sip on his tea. Such a formation might seem powerful to others, but to Du Xianyu it was nothing. If his elder brother were to make a move, none of them would be able to escape. He had heard that the Null Division was also an army, and had seen the Null Division before, and was deeply shocked. But the Null Division was ultimately an outsider, and their way of operating was beyond Fu Jingji's understanding. He was completely clueless as to how strong the Null Division was. Tang Tian was in a daze, but his eyes quickly regained clarity, and he clenched his fists. You agreed? Dooku could not contain his excitement. He knew how difficult it was to invite his sister. Master Ghost Face Mask was extremely satisfied with his work, and Fu Jingji heaved a sigh of relief. Ji Zhe had outstanding talent. He was young and had limitless potential, but he cared more about the growth of his own strength, and lacked interest in an army. But Fu Jingji was different. His personal strength had already reached its peak, and it was difficult for him to advance any further. He was not alone. He had the Fu family behind him, and the things he had to think about were much more than Ji Zhe, who had nothing to worry about. Du Xianyu stopped and raised her head. Army? Dooku was satisfied with his sister's ability to grasp the main point. That's right, an army. In terms of numbers, this victory is not too praiseworthy. The Null Division mobilized over 1,000 people, and many of them were injured. But the Null Division's over 1,000 people, all of them have just gained enlightenment on law threads. Upon clarifying his thoughts and thinking, Fu Jingji, the man who had held the position of patriarch for over 10 years, immediately displayed his capability and ability. He did not blindly choose the Fu family disciples, and with his strict standards, only 3 of them were allowed to join. Begin the training. The future was bleak. He was extremely discouraged. He could almost see his and the Fu family's end. Tang Tian shook his head. It's not a small number. This conclusion caused Fu Jingji to almost suffocate. I have been in Sin Domain for a long time. How is everyone doing? Now, everything has the possibility of changing. Isn't it a little too little? Ji Zhe muttered. Their opponent is the Null Division. Just this title alone was enough to make him extremely excited. The Du residence was the #1 residence in Sin Domain, but Dooku did not like to be extravagant, and the Du residence looked like an ordinary courtyard. But no one would look down on the dilapidated courtyard. All of the guests that came to visit the Du residence would alight 3 streets away, and walk to the Du residence's entrance to show their respect. No one or any ship dared to appear above the Du residence. Just like that, the Sin Domain's first army was formed. In the tea house at the entrance of the Du residence, when Dooku had nothing to do, he liked to sit there and brew a pot of tea and pass his time. 1,000 rookies who have gained enlightenment on law threads defeated 4 list of powerhouses martial artists? Du Xianyu concluded. Tang Tian, who was on the roof, did not look at the chaotic scene below. He chewed on the grass in his mouth, with his arms as a pillow. He stared at the dusky sky in a daze. The Sin Domain's grass roots were as hard as iron wires. The taste was bitter and astringent, without the fragrance of grass. Until this time, when Master Ghost Face Mask's army displayed a terrifying might, it was like a ray of sunlight that pierced through the haze, allowing him to see hope. His hope, the hope of the Fu family. In the huge tea house, he did not have a private room, and the shopkeeper would not specially prepare any good tea leaves for him, and at times, when business was too busy, he would be called to help add water for the customers. Dooku muttered in dissatisfaction. This treatment, even I don't have as much face as you. And the Sin Domain's first army has to rely on Master's awakened god armor, and only Master can command them. That means that the Sin Domain's first army will become Master's direct subordinate army. In Sharp Wind City, there were only 50 martial artists who fulfilled the conditions. But Fu Jingji, who had already viewed the Sin Domain's first army as his mission and future, had even harsher standards. He knew all of their characters like the back of his hand. The old and wily ones were all eliminated, although he did not understand armies, but he understood the importance of obedience. Other than that, the young were prioritized. They represented more flexibility and greater potential. Tang Tian suddenly stood up and jumped down from the roof. It was this disparity that formed the Sin Domain's current form of governance. Du Xianyu did not raise her head. She knew that it was not the main point. Even if the Su family was destroyed, her brother would not care. Du Xianyu understood. So you want me to form an army? Now, please carry out your duties as an assistant. Laws. Dooku's eyes lit up. Their commander is a blind man. But the laws that he has gained enlightenment on are extremely unique. Many of the Een threads weave together like a spider web, and through this invisible web, he can command and attack. The Su family has sent out 4 martial artists from the list of powerhouses. Dooku looked at the teacup in front of him, and drank it in one gulp. Lu Xingxiang and Qin Zhen are dead, Sophie has been captured, and the death attendant has escaped, but with a strand of life force planted in him, I reckon that he will not live for long. The 3 streets around the Du residence were all restricted to flying. The people living on the 3rd street were all ordinary citizens who ran their daily businesses. The citizens of the city were not afraid of the Du residence's reputation, and the 3rd street was filled with people, brimming with life. The Du residence did not have any impact on the area. He was not sure how many lost surfaces his awakened god armor could connect to. His identity as the number 1 person was still respected, but it was no longer someone who could take and take. Regardless of whether or not he could challenge Dooku, it represented an unparalleled military strength, and its future was bound to be glorious and glorious. In the Sin domain, the disparity in realm could not be bridged with numbers. That was the most basic common sense. Martial artists who had gained enlightenment on law surfaces, against martial artists who had law threads, were completely suppressed. Law threads, law surface, law domain, every level of difference was an insurmountable gap. Du Xian Yu had a beautiful appearance, she was fresh and charming, her hair flowed down like a waterfall, she sat opposite Dooku quietly, her hands holding onto a big bowl of coarse tea, sipping on it. She could not be bothered with her brother's grumbling. Du Xian Yu stood up, leaving behind a beautiful back view. Master had warned her before, they only needed martial artists with perfect law surfaces. In the Sin domain, perfect law surfaces were the starting point for a first-rate martial artist. If they trained in special laws, or if they had special inheritances, they had the possibility of fighting their way into the list of powerhouses. Du Xian Yu knew that if numbers could break through the unbreakable gap, that would mean that the Sin domain's ruling structure would be completely destroyed, and Dooku's position would be shaken. Sin domain's first army. The Null Division did not break the rule of the Sin domain being unable to form armies. I understand. Du Xian Yu nodded. Chapter 797. When a few copies of the defensive arrangements were sent to the front-line staff officer department, even Go Ching Wendao, who did not show his emotions, had his face twitch twice. Go Ching Wendao's face did not have any fluctuations, he watched the battlefield expressionlessly. The Honorable Martial Continent had infiltrated the southern region for many years, they had secretly gathered intelligence from various places, and the strategically important Ocean Guardian stronghold was naturally the most important. The surrounding generals all looked excited, as if they were waiting to watch a good show. The siege fleet was as slow as a tortoise, but they had finally arrived. The probing attack made everyone understand how tough the Ocean Guardian stronghold was. Their speed was slow and their defenses were weak, but their firepower was fierce, and their range was so long that all the other warships paled in comparison. Yes, the figure that brought them to where they were today. Really, he was too greedy. Even at this stage, he was still not satisfied? However, was there still a chance? Go Ching Wendao's trump card was the siege boats that he brought along with his army. But after they fought with Xie Yuan, the stronghold reconstruction project that no one paid much attention to immediately made everyone worried. The surrounding generals looked at each other in dismay. They had followed Darren for a long time and knew that Darren was always stingy with praising his enemies. It was truly rare to receive praise from Darren. Was he going to lose? No matter how hard the tortoise shell was, they could still smash it with a hammer. The soldiers around him were all dumbstruck, their faces pale. He was not crying in a dark corner, regretting that he had never come. But my war never stopped. It had not been easy all this way. It wasn't easy to reach here, it wasn't easy for the swift army to reach their current standard, it wasn't easy. His spirit, which had long been worn down, leaped out of the horizon like the sun. It swept past his lethargic body, and the burning pain made him feel alive. Large-scale siege boats were war beasts, and at the same time, they were gold-devouring beasts. Every single one of them had an astronomical price, and they were unquestionably the most expensive battle unit. The Honorable Marshal Continent had taken out 22 of them at once. Their wealth was extremely robust, causing people to be speechless. An astonishingly large fleet slowly entered the battlefield. After the Honorable Marshal Continent lost a few of their intelligence personnel, they heard about Xie Yuan's new defense. In the past, no one paid much attention to a nobody like Xie Yuan. From the start of his preparations, he did not consider defense at all. All of his preparations were for offense. As for the casualties, he didn't care at all. He knew that the higher-ups wouldn't care either. As long as they could quickly take down the Shang continent, nothing else would be a problem. How despairing! Up until now, the development of the war had not exceeded his pre-war plans. The battle was extremely intense. For the first time, his unwavering confidence was shaken. The familiar voice of the master caused them to gradually regain their senses. Xie Yuan stared blankly at these incredibly slow war beasts, his face ashen. There was no stronghold that could remain unscathed under the attack of 22 large sieging ships. From the start of the preparation work before departure, all of his plans revolved around this point. In many people's eyes, Goqing Wendao was impulsive and crazy, but very few people knew that Goqing Wendao had made ample preparations before the battle. At a time when time was more important than anything else, it was worth it no matter what they used to exchange for time. In his deduced plans, the Ocean Guardian stronghold had appeared more than once. The number of strongholds in the southern region could be counted with one's fingers, and the Ocean Guardian stronghold's strategic position was extremely important. The Shang continent's fighting strength was at a disadvantage, and borrowing the advantage of the stronghold's defense was extremely normal. Like how strict their commander was, the soldiers of the swift army were mostly silent. They did not discuss or speak, they only quietly returned to their positions and started to prepare for the upcoming battle. They were not lying on their sickbeds waiting for death to descend upon them. The upcoming attack will be extremely intense, everyone must be mentally prepared. But it is not that we do not have a chance. 6 hours, as long as we persevere for 6 hours, we will have a chance to win. Goqing Wendao's determination to fight was naturally not something that could be scared off by just a few defense plans. There was no need to doubt Xie Yuan's standard, but it was not like he did not have any trump cards. 6 hours, no matter what, I hope everyone can help me hold on for 6 hours. If only it was the Ocean Guardian stronghold in the past. The adjutant said. The soldiers who were on fire all cried out in pain as they jumped down from the flames and fell into the sea of energy. When the 22 large-scale siege boats slowly entered the battlefield, the huge battle immediately quieted down. Since ancient times, the battle between offense and defense had never stopped. The stronghold's advantage in defense had always made it difficult for an army to advance. But strongholds also had their natural enemies, and that was the siege boat. These siege boats were specially designed to deal with defensive fortifications. They possessed extremely strong firepower and extremely long range. Xie Yuan, who became famous in one battle, attracted the attention of the Honorable Marshal Continent's intelligence department, and every bit of information about him was quickly dug out. Even his homework in the academy was dug out from the pile of old papers and turned into research materials. But this time, his preparations were not in vain. He had carefully researched all the possible routes of attack, and tried out all the possible defensive and counterattack methods of the Shang continent, and finally came up with a plan that involved 62 types of contingency plans. Then I will hold on for 6 hours. The Ocean Guardian stronghold was enveloped by dazzling light auras. In the hands of the people who were just eating and waiting to die, the Ocean Guardian stronghold was just a dazzling gold warehouse, but in the hands of a famed general, a weapon warehouse with money and rations was enough to create a terrifying stronghold. Everyone, please prepare for battle. Xie Yuan's voice was not impassioned, but sincere, causing people to involuntarily think of the warm and gentle figure, the figure that accompanied them to crawl and roll in the mud, the figure that was not good at talking and boastful, but always had a smile on his face. Now, it was time for him to reveal his trump card. The generals around all nodded their heads. Before Xie Yuan took over, the Ocean Guardian stronghold's defenses were lax, and was like an armory filled with expensive weapons. At that time, the intelligence personnel had given a conclusion that even a group of pirates could easily take down the luxurious stronghold. It was said that the siege boats were weapons used to defeat strongholds, and the large-scale siege boats were true war beasts, the nightmares of all strongholds. Even for Xie Yuan, who was an expert in defense, when he saw the war beasts, his face could not help but change. He was not complacent, but he was not blindly confident. No matter how meticulous the plan was, it was impossible to predict the changes in the battlefield, and upon stepping onto the battlefield, he would hand the battle over to his berserk fighting instincts. The Ocean Guardian stronghold was an extremely tough bone. It was the strongest point of the enemy's defense, and was the nightmare of all attacking parties. But, upon breaking through the Ocean Guardian stronghold, the entire defense would instantly crumble, and they would be able to break through and attack the Shang continent. 6 hours? Even if I die like that, it will be worth it. Go Qing Wendao nodded his head. It truly lives up to its name. 22 big fellows were like 22 giant beasts with their bloody mouths wide open. No stronghold could withstand the siege of 22 giant beasts. The generals around clenched their fists tightly, their faces turning pale white. Such a siege was the cruelest. There was no leeway, no room for schemes. Every inch of space could only be fought with blood and determination. Xie Yuan revealed a bitter smile. He raised his head again, the light aura in his eyes piercing through the haze like the sun. In his calculations before the battle, the Ocean Guardian stronghold had given them a huge problem. How to pull out this nail was a problem that he had to face. He steeled his heart and decided to build an army of siege boats specially to deal with the Ocean Guardian stronghold. After a moment, the adjutant spoke out in surprise. "Master! The siege boats are in position." "That's right, I can't accept it." The large-scale siege boats of the Honorable Marshal Continent were incomparable to the small-scale siege boats used to attack the Sword Forest stronghold. The large-scale siege boats that resembled floating islands were the nightmare of all strongholds. Prepare for battle. The once unattainable dream had once again appeared in the middle-aged man's dreams. The siege boat army that consisted of 22 large-scale siege boats and 70 medium-scale siege boats could be said to be the strongest siege boat army in history. They were vast and mighty. Once the slow and defenseless sieging ships were attacked, it would be a disaster. Go Qing Wendao personally escorted them, and did not hesitate to slow down their speed. No one underestimated the battle. Furthermore, the opponent was Xie Yuan, who was famed for his defense. But no one objected to Master Go Qing Wendao's decision. To the Honorable Marshal Continent, every second was extremely precious, to the point that they were willing to pay with their blood. Is my dream of becoming a gold-ranked military general going to end? The master's voice was as calm as usual, as though he was talking about an extremely ordinary matter. The densely packed warships surrounded it like a swarm of locusts. The light auras spewed out from the warships like raindrops. The Ocean Guardian stronghold was not to be outdone and retaliated. Thick light pillars, groups of sword auras, and light regiments that resembled raindrops pounced onto the densely packed warships. From time to time, there would be warships exploding, releasing white light auras that illuminated the sea of energy like a sun. When the light auras dimmed, the orange-red flames that resembled a blossoming flower enveloped the wreckage of the warships. Begin the attack. Go Qing Wendao said indifferently. He heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. The Ocean Guardian's stronghold was like a porcupine in a tortoise shell, causing no one to be able to attack. Everyone then understood what grade of porcupine the Ocean Guardian's stronghold in front of them was. The blood that had long cooled down started to warm up again, it started to boil with desire, and started to burn with longing, just like when they were young. Whose dreams will definitely come true. All of this changed after Xie Yuan's inspection. That's right, unknowingly, it has happened. Many people revealed looks of suspicion, in front of such absolute strength. Why does the master say that we still have a chance? The warm voice sounded out in every corner of the Ocean Guardian's stronghold, causing the dazed soldiers to raise their heads. Chapter 798. You want to disobey orders? Ping Ruan narrowed his eyes. Guan Jin's jaw dropped. Why didn't he know? Even so, creating a large siege ship was a time-consuming and laborious task. It took up to 3 years to complete, and it was a daunting task. Bai Yu and Guan Jin had never heard of 10 large-scale siege boats appearing at the same time, and suddenly hearing that there were 22 large-scale siege boats. How could they believe it? Large-scale siege ships were one of the best combat units in the Sacred Galaxy. Among the siege weapons, they were the undisputed kings. The large sieging ships were extremely large, and were the largest warships, resembling a moving stronghold. Pang Rua glanced at the dazed Bai Yu and continued, The Southern Alliance's strength is actually much stronger than I thought. If the Ocean Guardian's stronghold could not stop Go Qing Wendao, they could only retreat to the Shang continent. The Shang continent's estuary was very small, and large-scale siege boats were unable to enter, even medium-scale siege boats were unable to enter. To the Southern Alliance, their only chance was to set the battlefield in the Shang continent. If the Honorable Martial Continent truly wants to take over the Shang continent, Go Qing Wendao will have to send troops into the Shang continent, and at that time, the large-scale siege boats will be at their weakest, and to us, that is our only chance. Guan Jin immediately understood. The old general was prepared to use the Southern Alliance as bait. But he had to admit that this was an excellent plan, and it was also the only one that could be realized at the moment. Watching the old general leave expressionlessly, Guan Jin's face darkened. "My lord, why didn't this subordinate know about such important information?" Peng Ruo revealed a look of disappointment. Bai Yu's words did not have any useful content. Xie Yuan was not one to sit and wait for death. The Southern Alliance's commander-in-chief was not one to sit and wait for death, so what was the use? In the face of absolute power, such arguments were laughable. Guan Jin also revealed a look of suspicion. This news was truly too shocking. Regardless of how one looked at it, the White Crow Army held more weight than the Southern Alliance commander-in-chief. The Honorable Martial Continent had been operating on the strategy of encroaching on others for many years. Although there were no large-scale wars, there were always small-scale wars. The various armies of the Honorable Martial Continent all had ample battle experience. As for the southern region armies, most of them were just for show. Killing pirates was already considered a rare battle experience, and many of the armies had never been in a real battle ever since they were formed. Bai Yu laughed. Bai Yu was an outstanding general, and such a low-level mistake should not have happened to him. He didn't say the rest, nor did he need to. Any stronghold would be as fragile as a piece of paper in front of this unprecedented scale of siege fleets. There was no defensive line that could stop these war beasts. They had lost their defensive advantage on the battlefield. Bai Yu laughed. Oh, that was the decision I just made. Peng Ruo sighed in his heart. He didn't have the slightest intention of mocking them. When he first received the news, his reaction was even worse than the two of them. However, he was a veteran general with rich combat experience. Even in a hopeless situation, he would not despair. Guan Jin looked at the old general in confusion. Seeing Bai Yu's firm attitude, Peng Ruo did not waste any more time, and said, "I hope you do not regret this decision." Guan Jin looked at Bai Yu. In the entire southern region, only the White Crow Army and the Sacred Pagoda Army could complete the mission, but the allied armies needed the old generals to hold the fort, thus the mission could only fall onto them. Large-scale siege boats that targeted strongholds required a lot of top-notch technology. There were many weapon merchants in the Sacred Saint Galaxy, but there were only 3 that had the ability to manufacture large-scale siege boat. For example, the Suji Worldwide Commerce, which could be called a weapon merchant in the southern region, was unable to manufacture them. But it was the most urgent time. If not for General Peng Ruo standing in front of him, he would have thrown him out long ago. But, with the appearance of the war beasts, it instantly shattered his confidence. The astonishing size required an even more astonishing amount of precious materials, and that was one of the reasons why they were so expensive. And the other reason was that the difficulty of manufacturing them was extremely high, and similarly reached the highest level. The slow war beasts could easily crush all of the defensive lines, and with the loss of their defensive advantage, the Honorable Martial Continent's army would be able to charge in. At that time, the situation would deteriorate to the point of no return. The smile on Bai Yu's face disappeared, and he said indifferently. He was waiting for Bai Yu's explanation. The Southern Alliance's defensive line will soon fall, and the Shang continent will not be able to hold on. The old general said. After taking over the Shang continent with the benefits of the black gold, our situation will become even worse. We need to think of a way to destroy the large-scale siege boats, no matter how many casualties we have to pay. If not. Peng Ruo frowned. He never thought that at such a stage, Bai Yu would still be hoping for a fluke. He was surprised. After fighting alongside Bai Yu for the past few days, he had gradually understood Bai Yu, and knew that he was not an irresolute and hesitant general. Seeing Bai Yu's shameless look, Guan Jin's anger dissipated for some reason. It was the first time that Peng Ruo was interested in the so-called commander-in-chief of the Southern Alliance. The Honorable Martial Continent's orders were unified, and once they made a decision, they would be united and determined. Although he was the commander-in-chief of the Allied forces in name, but there were many factions below him, and their relationships were complicated, and there were many cases of people agreeing in public but opposing in private. It is difficult. The old general nodded his head, but no matter how difficult it is, we need to destroy them. The Ocean Guardian stronghold will definitely not be able to hold on, and even the Southern Alliance's defensive line will definitely be destroyed. If the Honorable Martial Continent truly plans to take over the Shang continent, we might have a chance. Bai Yu jumped up, as though he was shocked. He quickly shook his head. 22 large-scale siege boats? Impossible. How can the Honorable Martial Continent have so many large-scale siege boats? 22 of them. Stop joking. Do the entire Sacred Saint Galaxy even have 22 large-scale siege boats? Guan Jin was also waiting for his master's explanation. To him, it was their only chance, and he did not understand why his master would hesitate on such a crucial matter. Bai Yu suddenly raised his head, and unexpectedly, he shook his head. The situation might not be that bad. The old general's face became gloomy. When he saw the news, his first reaction was disbelief. Only after confirming it repeatedly did he find out that the ridiculous news was actually true, and his heart sank to the bottom. After fighting with Chiu Su Hua, Peng Ruo had a direct understanding of the Honorable Martial Continent's army's fighting capabilities. If not for Bai Yu's sudden attack, the Allied forces would have been doomed. Fighting in their home ground, the southern region armies did not lack fighting spirit, and the affluent southern region was not inferior in terms of equipment either, but the quality of the soldiers and the standard of their officers were not on the same level. Bai Yu laughed and handed over a cup of chrysanthemum tea. Drink some tea, it will cool you down. Peng Ruo did not say anything, he only looked at Bai Yu, who did not have any trace of panic on his face, nor was he pretending. He was slightly disappointed, but more than that, he was surprised. The White Crow Army is actually listening to the orders of the Southern Alliance's commander-in-chief? 22 large-scale siege boats were crushing their way. They were unstoppable. If not for their extremely slow speed, they would not even have the chance. Even so, they had to retreat at full speed, and only then would they have a chance. If they were to delay, the time they had would disappear. We cannot delay any longer. Peng Ruo immediately made a decision, and said coldly, "As the commander-in-chief of the Allied forces, I order the White Crow Army to immediately carry out the orders." As he said that, his eyes slowly lit up. Furthermore, their commander-in-chief is not one to sit still and wait for death. Who knew that the White Crow Army would listen to the Southern Alliance's orders? There were too many thought-provoking things. The outside world thought that the Bai family was investing in the Southern Alliance, and not fully joining them. But from the looks of it, it was different from what everyone thought. But the war beasts belonged to the other side of the battlefield, causing the old general to tremble. Peng Ruo did not look like he was joking. "I have already confirmed it. The situation will not be that bad." Bai Yu repeated his words while organizing his thoughts, thinking about how to organize his words. The Ocean Guardian stronghold is defended by Xie Yuan. The stronghold that he has set up will not be destroyed so easily. Even if the enemy has so many large-scale siege boats, it will not be easy. I know him well. He is not one to sit still and wait for death. To the southern region, it was definitely the worst news. Time is of the essence. I hope that your army can move out now. We will launch an attack on Chiu Suhua and cover your retreat. The old general said. 22 large-scale siege boats, the most luxurious fleet in history, caused the old general to be at a loss. The unprecedented scale of war beasts gathered together, it will definitely be a spectacular sight. Guan Jin bit his lips, causing them to turn white. It will be difficult. Go Qing Wendao will definitely protect the large-scale siege boats with all his might. I am sorry, I am not under the control of the Allied forces. Bai Yu kept the smile on his face and said calmly, "The White Crow Army belongs to the Southern Alliance and only listens to the orders of the Southern Alliance's commander-in-chief." This did not cause the old general to lose confidence in the situation, because they were fighting in their own territory. With the advantage of defense, they had sufficient depth, although they would have to pay a huge price, but as long as they could drag the enemy into a stalemate, the final victory would belong to them. What? The White Crow Army was a gold-rank army with an extraordinary position, and the current southern region only had 2 gold-rank armies left. If not for Bai Yu's lack of prestige, he could even pull out an allied army like Peng Ruo. Guan Jin was startled, but then a surge of anger surged. "Master, do you know what this decision means? How many people in the southern region have died because of this decision? This subordinate does not understand. Why is Master so confident in them? Even in such an irreversible situation, Master actually thinks that they have a way, and made such a rash decision. Time will prove everything." Bai Yu replied. Only the top-grade weapons merchants with immense wealth and technology could manufacture large-scale siege boat. Time will prove everything. Bai Yu's mouth was wide open, but no sound came out, his face without any color. Guan Jin, who was beside him, had an equally pale face. Chapter 799. The Honorable Marshal Continent's intelligence system tried to obtain the Ocean Guardian stronghold's defense map, but to no avail, and only knew that it had been redesigned. That star treasures. All of the generals stopped their discussions. Their attention was attracted to the battlefield. One after another, the towering colossal figures slowly lit up with light auras, as though they were ancient beasts that were slowly awakening from their slumber. Bang! He knew that the higher-ups were more interested in Heaven's Road than the sacred Saint Galaxy, but Go Qing Wendao was the complete opposite. Instead of betting on the uncertain and unknown Heaven's Road, why not focus on the sacred Saint Galaxy? The large-scale siege boats' attacks were extremely slow. Every attack that struck the defensive barrier would produce an extremely low explosive sound. It was like an ancient giant brandishing a heavy hammer, Every attack would strike deep into the hearts of people, causing them to feel a slight numbness, causing them to be filled with reverence. Goqing Wendao's attention had already turned to the layout of the entire southern region. Too terrifying! The large-scale siege boats were completing their preparations to attack the stronghold. The preparations of the large-scale siege boats were extremely complicated, the energy that they spewed out was extremely astonishing, and almost no materials could withstand it, thus they needed to use complicated structures to share the pressure. The defensive barrier is broken. Unparalleled merit, that should be referring to unifying the sacred Saint Galaxy. Thinking about the Ocean Guardian stronghold wailing under the dazzling light aura, and the entire southern region trembling in front of him, an indescribable joy surged from his heart. The surroundings of the Ocean Guardian stronghold was a true death zone, the surging energy was extremely fatal. The aftermath of the explosion was enough to shatter warship. They were large-scale siege boats, the top beasts of the food chain. Upon launching an attack, they would not be able to move, and just like how they required a long time to prepare, their cooldown time was equally long. The star treasures frantically absorbed the incoming energy, as though they had been starving for 10,000 years. Oh my God! Inside the Ocean Guardian stronghold, it was extremely calm. From the initial panic, the swift army soldiers quickly adapted. The stronghold beneath their feet was still trembling, but there was no more panic on their faces. In a moment, the Ocean Guardian stronghold's defensive barrier regained its brightness. It was too intense. Every star treasure blossomed with a faint light aura. Xie Yuan's gaze never left the large-scale siege boats, and when he saw the light auras of the large-scale siege boats becoming brighter, he took a deep breath. Open all the gates. The Ocean Guardian stronghold's defensive barrier was broken. The second large siege ship opened fire, the third large siege ship opened fire, but the Honorable Martial Continent's generals did not care. In front of the 22 sieging boats, any stronghold was like a crispy biscuit. Target number 15, prepare to attack. We have been waiting impatiently. The other side must have been suffering for a long time. In the face of absolute power, what's the use of being a famous general? Inside the Ocean Guardian stronghold, it was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop, and everyone held their breath. To any general, unifying the sacred region was more tempting than conquering an unknown world. Exclamations and praises sounded out. Many of the Honorable Martial Continent's generals revealed fanaticism on their faces. Their hearts were trembling and cheering. All of them were filled with pride. How powerful! That is the Honorable Martial Continent, our Honorable Martial Continent. Once they finished their preparations, Xie Yuan would have no chance at all. His subordinate's report interrupted his thoughts. He looked up and saw that Xie Yuan had not attacked yet. He shook his head. Xie Yuan was good at defense, but he lacked courage. Although it was a trap ahead, but it was the only chance. No matter how slim the hope was, to not fight for it and just wait for death. Such an action was something that Goqing Wendao, who viewed offense as his life, could not accept. But thinking about it, all the generals that were good at defense had the same character. Now, on Goqing Wendao's flagship, gasps and exclamations sounded out. Even the generals of the Honorable Martial Continent had rarely seen the might of a large-scale sieging boat. But the atmosphere was still extremely tense. Everyone's mental state was extremely tense. Hurried commands rang out amidst the whistling explosions that filled the sky. Goqing Wendao was shocked. Since you're determined to be a turtle, then I will shatter your turtle shell. An extremely bright and thick light pillar instantly pierced through the entire battlefield, and smashed onto the defensive barrier of the Ocean Guardian stronghold. In the shadows of the Ocean Guardian stronghold, one after another sluice gates were opened, and the chaotic energy in the sea of energy surged in. Behind every sluice gate was a silver star treasure. The entire battlefield was enveloped by the dazzling white-silver light and the low and powerful explosions. The bombardment lasted for an entire hour, which was even louder than the previous explosions, causing everyone's mental state to be roused. The indestructible Ocean Guardian stronghold was like a small wooden house in the middle of a storm, on the verge of collapse. At that time, the Ocean Guardian stronghold was already perfect in his heart, but he still managed to obtain a few star treasures from Master Bing. It was because of his perfectionist mentality, even without the star treasures, he did not think that anyone would be able to take down the Ocean Guardian stronghold. The entire Ocean Guardian stronghold was trembling intensely, to the point that they could not even stand properly. Everyone grabbed onto anything that could be stabilized, their minds in a daze. Who knew that they would actually be put to use? Sluice gate number 2, open. A light flashed past Xie Yuan's eyes. He did not know if he could achieve the title of third best defender under the heavens, but in terms of defense, he had absolute confidence. This pride was hidden deep in his heart, and no one knew about it. Just like how no one knew that the Ocean Guardian stronghold that he had painstakingly constructed was his own masterpiece. Master, the preparations are complete. That's right, I was still thinking if I could witness the glory of the third best defender under the heavens, but I no longer have the chance. If I am not wrong, it should be 38M. The urgent order was quickly passed down, causing the atmosphere to become extremely tense. The protective barrier is not even at 10%. This truly makes one feel despair. Goqing Wendao had specially laid out the trap, and his direct subordinated army was rubbing their palms. If Xie Yuan were to give up on the stronghold and fight with them, Goqing Wendao would be equally happy. The star treasures are fully charged. No one could stop them. The large-scale siege boats were powerful, but at the same time, they were weak, as they did not have any defensive capabilities. The complicated structure meant that they were easily destroyed. As expected of the top-grade siege boats, the light pillar that attacked just now was at least 20 m in diameter. Xie Yuan's only chance was to take advantage of the time when the war beasts were preparing to launch a sneak attack and destroy the large-scale siege boat. Xie Yuan did not use it right from the start. He was waiting for the large-scale siege boats to attack. He had never come into contact with large-scale siege boats before, but he understood the weaknesses of the war beast. In terms of design, he had reached the pinnacle. Not only that, he had prepared a trump card that no one knew of. Conquering Heaven's Road might allow their path to unify the sacred Saint Galaxy to be smoother, but by the time Heaven's Road was conquered, he would no longer be young. The Shang continent would no longer be able to create any waves, and the entire situation of the southern region would be advantageous to the honorable Martial continent. Goqing Wendao listened to his subordinates' discussions. He lowered his head and drank his tea, and did not say anything to stop them. When he had first proposed the plan, he had met with intense opposition from many people, and if not for his persistence, they would not even be able to achieve a quarter of the scale. The dazzling light aura enveloped the entire battlefield. The dazzling light aura caused people's eyes to feel pain. But even so, the honorable Martial continent's generals continued to widen their eyes. It was an extremely rare scene, and if they were to miss it, they would definitely regret it for the rest of their lives. In front of such a powerful force, who could stop them? No one understood the Ocean Guardian stronghold better than Xie Yuan. Every inch of space in the stronghold had been inspected by him, and every battle position was carefully selected by him. He had completely abandoned the previous defense arrangements and redesigned them. That's right, the strength of humans in front of these huge beasts is so insignificant. Let's attack. Xie Yuan's face immediately turned sinister. He roared with all his might, "Attack! The star treasures are almost fully charged." His subordinate's tone carried a trace of nervousness, causing the atmosphere to become extremely tense. They marked the 22 large-scale siege boats with corresponding numbers, and prepared for the upcoming battle. The southern region was theirs, the entire sacred Saint Galaxy was theirs. Bang! The Southern Alliance was defeated, and they could use the pontoon bridge to quickly advance. With the Southern Alliance as the bridgehead, the difficulty of attacking the southern region would be greatly reduced. The 22 large-scale siege boats were all out of the Ocean Guardian stronghold's warship weapons firing range, and the other party could only watch as their turtle shell was slowly being destroyed, unable to retaliate. The soldiers inside the stronghold were roused. They were not unfamiliar with the undulations that suddenly appeared. It was the undulations produced by the star treasures absorbing energy. But the intensity of the undulations far exceeded their imaginations. When he first saw the Sword Forest stronghold, he was attracted by the unique defense arrangement. He himself had profound attainments in defense arrangements, and in a short period of time, he understood the principles behind the Sword Forest stronghold. After that, Bing equipped the swift army with star treasures, and irresponsibly requested Xie Yuan to study the tactic. Xie Yuan had spent a great deal of effort, and his understanding of the star treasures had deepened. A complete Ocean Guardian stronghold held much more strategic value than a stronghold ruins. He only needed to arrange a small number of soldiers, and they would be able to hold the throat, which would be of great help to the entire southern region. The two officers in charge had flushed red faces, and roared out at the same time. Truly pitiful! When the light aura dissipated, the Ocean Guardian stronghold appeared in their vision. The brightness of the defensive barrier had obviously dimmed by a large margin, causing another wave of exclamations. For a large-scale stronghold like the Ocean Guardian stronghold, its defensive barrier was definitely a sturdy turtle shell. Open Sluice Gate 1. But no one cared. It was just an attack from one large-scale siege boat. As long as a few more attacked at the same time, the Ocean Guardian stronghold's energy barrier would shatter. If there were no large-scale siege boats to shake the thick defensive barrier, who knew how many people would have to be sacrificed? Previously they had probed and attacked, but were unable to do anything to the turtle shell. They watched the battlefield leisurely. Many of them even brewed tea and held onto the teacups, chatting in groups of 3 to 5, occasionally casting their gazes towards the battlefield. This is truly making us anxious. Such an unprecedented display of fireworks, in the history of the Sacred Saint Galaxy, has never appeared before. Chapter 800. Penniless. He was prepared to advise the master. The army was related to his and his family's future, and he could not let the master be so dispirited. He thought about it again. Maybe the master is just giving everyone a long-term goal. 100% is too much, but 50% is a possibility. Even if it is 50%, 100 law surfaces resonating, that power is still extremely terrifying. Oh, refining spirit treasures! That thought flashed past his mind. Tang Tian's face fell. To a tyrant who had squandered money like dirt to buy armies and warships, and had always won by throwing money at his enemies, the feeling of being penniless was simply the worst. Without being able to borrow the power projected from the law surfaces, his body and body were ordinary, and after hanging for an entire night, his expression became weary. If only Bing was here, it would be great, Tang Tian muttered in his mind. But he only muttered for a moment. Since no one can help me, I can only rely on myself. He racked his brains and tried his best to recall how Bing trained the army. Fu Jingji, who thought that he understood, only realized how naive he was after the training. It was reasonable to say that their understanding of law surfaces had already reached the peak, and their control over their power had reached a level where they could do as they wished, and they were able to handle the training. But no one expected for the master's request to be so high. To them, it was an impossible task. The 200 men were also at the perfection of their law surfaces, but they were on a completely different level compared to the two of them. It was reasonable to say that Fu Jingji and the rest were wealthy, but Tang Tian had never thought of using them. Tang Tian, who was born as a tyrant in Andrew Academy, had a simple thought: they are already following me. If I don't give them any benefits, I want to take away their wealth? Tang Tian, who thought that he had thought it through, was immediately overjoyed. This is easy to solve. Wait a minute. Tang Tian suddenly reacted. He was not in Ursa Major constellation, nor was he in the sacred Saint Galaxy, but the Sin domain, where he was penniless. Tang Tian did not start training as per usual, but scratched his chin. He was reflecting on himself. Towards the army, he had only started halfway, and was forced to do things beyond his capabilities. Bing had thought of torturing him to become a mechanical martial artist, but he did not want to torment him to become a military general. Even Bing, who had always cherished the glory of the Southern Cross, felt despair towards Tang Tian's path as a military general. Tang Tian had never thought that his talent in this aspect would be any better. When he found the master, he heard the master mumbling something in his sleep, but he did not understand a single word. The seemingly impossible goal left everyone dumbfounded. However, the Lord set an example and led everyone to train together. The adults in training were ruthless and did not care about feelings at all. If there was even the slightest mistake, they would have to start over, no matter how tired he was the day before. On the second day, Sir was unshakable, transforming into a machine that never knew fatigue. Over and over again, not only did the training not decrease, it increased instead. During the training process, the adult was like a devil. His emotions would not fluctuate in the slightest. There was no severe punishment or reprimand. His indifferent tone was always tirelessly correcting. His Excellency's understanding of the laws had reached such a terrifying level? Could it be that Master was actually the same as Du Ku, a domain martial artist? Tang Tian, who was about to go crazy, suddenly had a light in his eyes. That was a good idea. Furthermore, when he thought about how he would be facing a tyrant like Du Ku, a small amount of wealth would not be able to move him. To him, the master's strength was without a doubt strong. The only person who could be compared to the master was probably Sin Domain's #1 martial artist, Du Ku. As for whether the master was stronger or Du Ku, that was not something he could judge. But no matter how strong the master was, he was still too young, and took things for granted. As expected, after the first day of training, the master was so tired that he could not even move a finger. Thinking about that, Tang Tian did not have any reason to be angry. He felt that he had truly wronged everyone. If it was an ordinary matter, it was fine for everyone to listen to your orders, but if you wanted everyone to give their all, it would not be acceptable for them to be stingy. He was completely unable to see any flaws, and his demands were so strict that it caused people to be fearful. Furthermore, he was vicious and merciless, and if anyone were to provoke him, they would definitely die a horrible death. Although every single soldier was carefully selected by Fu Jingji, but none of the martial artists that had joined had thought that the training would be so bitter. Now, upon hearing that word, he would subconsciously tremble. The army was quickly growing, and after a few days, it had become presentable. Although the master was slightly strict, but thinking about the bright future, his heart could not help but become excited. Furthermore, it was 200 people. After ordering Fu Jingji to release them, he continued to think of a way. Master is actually aiming for a 100% resonance. But the reality was right in front of him, and it was the best method he could think of. If the army was truly successful, the Sin domain would naturally not be able to restrict him, and he would not even place Du Ku in his eyes. At that time, who would dare to imprison the Null Division members? Wouldn't they just obediently send them to me? Empty promises? Although Tang Tian's skin was extremely thick, but he was still unable to do such a thing. He was an absolute perfectionist. If there was anything bad about it, it would be that the master was too strict. Oftentimes, he felt that everyone had done well, but what awaited them would always be an emotionless again. The discipline was strict and fair, there were rewards and punishments. A penny was a pound, that logic was the same everywhere under the heavens. On the third day, after the master finished training, he immediately fell asleep, and did not even eat. Everyone felt that victory was in sight. The fourth day, the fifth day, the sixth day. Before he could say anything, the master saw him, his eyes lit up, and said, "Your green sword, let me take a look." This is the master's first reprimand, and I want to embarrass him. Isn't that courting death? Don't look at how he and Ji-Zhe had completed the law surface resonance, but what standard were the two of them at? Their control of the power projected from the law surface was first-rate in the Sin domain. It did not seem difficult for the two of them to complete the resonance, but the level of technique required was not low. In their despair, some of them retreated and escaped. That's impossible. Many of them felt that the master was overconfident, and with such a high-intensity training, the master would be the first to collapse. Fu Jingji was confused, but he still handed the green sword over to the master. After a long time, Fu Jingji also grasped Master Ghost Face Mask's temper. Wait a minute. Fu Jingji stood up as usual, and when he arrived at the training grounds, he stopped in his tracks. Every soldier who entered the training grounds had their eyes twitch. Many of them rejoiced that they were not hot-headed and deserted. In that moment the entire army was filled with trepidation. He did not know how to refine spirit treasures, and there were no star treasures required to do so. But the Sin domain's materials were extremely unique, and were completely different from the Heaven's Road Sacred Saint Galaxy. When Fu Jingji heard Master Ghost Face Mask's unique and emotionless words for the first time, he was completely dumbstruck, and only regained his senses after a few minutes, and subconsciously wanted to refute. But the shadow that Master Ghost Face Mask had left in his heart was too strong, and it was this intense shadow that caused him to forcefully stop himself 2 seconds before he blurted out. Tang Tian did not care about principles towards his enemies, but as long as he treated them as his comrades, he would not hesitate. Tang Tian's eyes lit up. He felt that he had grasped the crux of the problem. That's right, I am punished but not rewarded, no wonder, no wonder. Tang Tian revealed a look of understanding. If you want a horse to run, you naturally have to feed the horse. He understood this simple logic. The entire army kept quiet out of fear. Everyone secretly heaved a sigh of relief. It's truly bitter. Fu Jingji felt that he was someone who had seen much of the world, but training every day felt as though it was a year. He had to brace himself, and in the end, he did not know how he was able to hold on. Even Ji-Zhe, who spoke arrogantly and boasted that he had never suffered before, would stare blankly every day, and upon hearing the master speak of training, he would reveal a look of fear. Fu Jingji's heart jumped. Could it be that the master has taken a fancy to my green sword? Senior Gui Wu's soul-sacrificing pearl had recorded a large number of refining methods, but Little Fool was even more proficient in it, so Tang Tian did not put it in his heart. Now that he was forced into a corner, he could only frown, and see if he could recall anything. But after thinking about it, he felt that it was not possible. Master does not use sword. And Master even gave the death thumb ring to Su Yi. Why would he covet my green sword? Fu Jingji was extremely proud. Not 2 people, not 20 people, but 200 people. 200 law surfaces resonating. What concept is that? As long as there is a slight difference in time, it will not be completed. But the problem is, what should I reward them with? Fu Jingji immediately became worried. Could it be that Master is disheartened because of the desertion? There's no need for that. Although there are some twists and turns, but the future of the army is bright. On the second day, it was the same. The Master was even more tired. If only the silver Aquarius cabinet is here, with the mountain of star treasures and rare treasures inside, why would I be in such a sorry state? Day after day passed. Everyone who was patiently waiting finally could not take it anymore. With that thought, it lasted for an entire night. Sin Domain's first army, thinking about the name made him laugh until he woke up in the middle of the night. It was not only him, even Ji-Zhe, the wild and untamed bewitching blade, was extremely well-behaved, and did not dare to have any temper. The two at the front did not make a sound, and the people below did not even dare to breathe loudly. It was not reasonable at all. Everyone saw the light of hope. 200 law surfaces resonating with each other. Tang Tian was a person who did not admit defeat. Since it was a good idea, then they definitely did something wrong. But what did they do wrong? If not, they would definitely not have such an unrealistic idea. If not, even if Little Fool was here, he could casually refine a few spirit treasures, and blind the eyes of these country bumpkins. Following that, Fu Jingji's eyes congealed. He did not know what method the master used, but all of their law surfaces were sealed by him. Fu Jingji's heart trembled. He had never heard of a law surface being sealed. But all of this was happening right in front of him. On the wooden poles in the distance, there were a few soldiers hanging upside down. There was no way their control could reach such a subtle level.